inspiring video of the digital decade, which is the new strategy for digital transformation in Europe. Welcome to this workshop that is being organized for helping the Commission to prepare the first State of the Digital Decade report that will be adopted mid-June at the Digital Assembly of Stockholm. And for introducing this workshop, which gather 15 experts from a very diverse origin, which will help us to figure out the trends and challenges in the very challenging areas and domains of technological development, of policy challenges. And together with these experts that we have here, we are also very happy to have more than 100 participants remotely watching us and being able to interact with us. We, as mentioned in the video and reminded in a slide that will come later, contributions, insights, facts are really welcome in our Futurium platform to contribute and complete today's discussion. But before that, I would like to introduce our acting director, Camilla Klock, who is going to present the overall policy architecture and overall context that we are aiming at fulfilling. I mean, Camilla is not only an acting director of the different domains that deals with telecom regulation, spectrum and digital decade, but she has been the one that has drafted and negotiated the text that we are implementing now. So we are very pleased to have you with all this background to introduce this discussion. Thank you very much, Camilla. And let's start with you.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I think you were telling colleagues here about my role in the Digital Decade Policy Program and Communication, but I should mention that Eric was the one who started all this process, I think almost 3 years ago. We started with some discussions over summer with our commissioner and colleagues here in DG, which resulted in a very important announcement by President von der Leyen, who named this decade Digital Decade in her speech on the State of the Union in 2022. And well, then we were consequently delivering different elements of this digital compass, starting, of course, with the Digital Decade communication, and followed by Digital Decade Policy Program, which was adopted. I think it's better now? Okay, super. Which was adopted in last year and entered in force in January 2023. I have also pleasure that since basically 1st of April, our directorate is now fully responsible for the Digital Decade. So Kasia and Eric and other colleagues here in the room are intensively already preparing the first report that will be presented in Stockholm on 15th of June. So there is very intensive work going on. And that's why this workshop is super important that we are having it now, because we would like to hear the views of stakeholders. We would like to hear what you think, what needs to be done in terms of Digital Decade and what this first report could contain. We would like this first report to be not only, it will be starting point of the process to some extent, because it will be the first report on the Digital Decade. It will be a little bit of continuation as well, because we are planning to use a lot of data that we have been collecting under DESI. So this you will also see. But we adjusted the way we are presenting things to, first of all, the 4 pillars of Digital Decade, to the targets that we presented there. We will present with this report also the trajectories, the European trajectories, how to get to this target, so how we see development at the EU level. And what is very important, we already will present analysis country by country on the basis of the data that we currently have, with already critical thinking, what is missing, where are the gaps at the EU level, but also at the country level. And this is very important. We want to really kickstart. We don't want this report to be just another report. We really want this report to be the start of very important coordination process that we'll have with member states, with stakeholders, because we don't have time to lose. We are really talking about 2030, just around the corner. So this report will be super important. We are putting a lot of attention to prepare it well. We are very much interested in your views. After the report will be issued, there will be a very important process that will start with the member states. So we will start discussing with them. First of all, we'll wait for the national roadmaps to arrive. We are also issuing guidance how this national roadmap should be prepared. So we'll have basically their way and their thinking, how they want to help to contribute to the achievement of digital targets at the EU level. And this will kick off discussion between Commission, Member States, European Parliament, of course, other institutions, and very much important with the stakeholders. So we would like to keep this process of a follow-up process also after the report very much open to stakeholders. We will use the Futurium platform, which, thanks to colleagues also in this room, has been a big success and gathered really big community. And we also use this type of workshops to continue discussion. So this is the first one, or not the first one, because we had several workshops on Digital Decade when we were preparing it and after it was prepared, but this is the first one really focusing on the report and starting the process. But there would be more of this in weeks, months, and years to come. So just to ensure you that this is our planning. For the discussion today, we divided this into 3 sessions. I will not talk more because I think it's important that you talk and you tell us what you think. But the 3 topics that we want to cover are key trends in digital transformation by 2030, Europe's challenges for digital transformation, and sustainable development, and how to ensure a twinning of the green and digital transition. So this is where we want to focus. These are quite broad topics, but very much connected to what we want to discuss also in the report. It will be very much also the starting point of the report, as you will see. So it's very timely that we have this discussion. I think I should also mention that, because there are many also participants connecting online, you can post your questions as well if you have them. I think there is also a QR code that was shown. Here it is. And we are very much, there will be discussion here according to the different panels that we set up, but you are very much welcome as well to participate, post your questions, and there would be also follow-up afterwards to make sure that everybody is included in this discussion. So with this, I think we should start and hear you instead of talking on our side.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Indeed, I think we have designed this workshop in a way that should be the more participative possible. So I'd like really to make sure that everyone has time to speak, and to do that, we need to be a bit disciplined. So please be to the point, short. We are particularly interested in updates in trends that we know, but also maybe more importantly on the sort of weak signal that are not in our radar, but which can make a difference and can be critical in the future. So again, we expect a frank and informed discussion. You have here a lot of people of the Digital Decade team. Camilla mentioned Kasia. I mean, a lot of people have organized this workshop against strikes and COVID crisis, and they have been heroic to that. So I'm thinking on Lavinia, Rachel, Lars, and Francesco. And again, everything that will be said, noted, questioned, will be taken on board, and we really commit, if we don't have time to respond today in the workshop, to really do it later on the website and Futurium. So keep watching Futurium for this. So now let's enter into the discussion. So we have the 2 first sessions are really interesting because they are addressing 2 aspects of the digital transformation. I mean, the world and the digital transformation as it is. And here we are going to hear from Alessandro and Florence. And the second session will be more on the digital transformation we aim at. So what should be changed? So for this first first session, I'd like to let the micro straight to Alessandro and then Florence, and then to open the discussion. Just to say that I have with me not an offline object, which is not connected, but which will be used if we need to close a point. It's not an aggression or a sanction, it's an invitation, of course. But in any case, it's very important that we all have the time to speak. So, Alessandro, the floor is yours.
Merci bien and good morning. I'm Alessandro from ETNO, the European Telecom Association. Today I will give you the perspectives from the viewpoint of those who build the networks. So it's a particular angle, it's not a comprehensive one, but I hope to give you some data. There should be coming up the presentation soon. Let's start with the basics. So how do we see rollout from the side of the European telecom industry? So the first slide here, you will see, if we can get to the next, there we go. So as you can see here, we have good progress on very high capacity networks. And I think that the policy direction set that by the Commission helps because when you have the target, you know where you want to go and everybody runs behind the target. You see here, we are doing very good progress on next generation access. And we are maybe in some areas still behind some global peers. That's something that we like to do as ETNO. Look, how are we doing compared to the US, to China, to South Korea? I would focus on fiber to the home, European numbers. So you must know this comes from our report, yearly report with analysis. Mason is the state of digital communications, and you'll find it on our website. 55.6% that is up from 50% of availability of fiber. So it's going well. We're still not where we should be, of course. On the next slide, let's look at the mobile side of the story, even though we know that they are both connected. Here, the picture is a bit less encouraging, if you wish. Again, Europe to Europe, we are doing well. We are progressing. So in 2021, it was 62% of the population that had the possibility to use a 5G network. End of 2022, it was 73%. It means we are progressing. If we compare ourselves to others, however, you see here USA, South Korea especially, they're doing very well. So we are behind. Also, later, I'll zoom in on the 5G standalone. That is the real 5G, and there we are doing even a bit less good. Next slide. Let's look a bit at the uptake, usage, and spend. Here, they are lower than elsewhere. So in terms of share of all mobile connections, I told you 73% had access, had the possibility to use a 5G connection, but only 6.4% in Europe is using it. And again, comparing to the other geographies, that's a lower number. So uptake and demand are an important aspect, which, by the way, is also in the Digital Decade program. It has been brought in more than in the past strategies. So that's good stuff. On the right-hand side, you see the spend. This is an important metric. It's one that is linked also to the health, to the financial health of an industry, and the usage. Also there you see that with the exception of China, but if we compare ourselves to the US, to Japan and South Korea, also they're doing less well than them. In the next slide, I want to give you a number that we are proud to produce for many years now, which is the CapEx, capital expenditure investment. It is historically at a high. Look at the left side of this slide. We are at the highest level of capital expenditures since 2017. This makes sense. We are on a hike. We are going towards FTTH. We are going towards fiber. So we are spending a lot. By the way, behind this slide, there is another number that is the so-called capital intensity, meaning how much of the revenues that our members get are reinvested into deployment. And this year it was 20%, which is very high compared also to global peers, which, depending on who you speak to, can be good or bad. So if you speak to policymakers, that's good. You're stretching the CapEx intensity. If our CEOs speak to the financial community, to the investors and to the shareholders, that's bad. I speak a lot to analysts in London, and it's a completely different conversation to the one that I have here. They say, oh, we are looking forward to the end of the CapEx hike. while when we speak with policymaker, the CapEx hike is a good thing. So we just need to be aware of that reality. On the next slide, I would like to show you instead, again, metrics that are a bit relevant for the financial aspects, but they should be relevant also from a policy viewpoint, because they are about the health of your industry. The average spend per capita on mainstream telecom services, you see that, again, with the exception of China, Europe is a bit behind. It means that in countries like the US or Japan, people spend more on telecom services. Then if I move left-hand side at the bottom, you see the harmonized consumer prices. We all know that prices, for example, for energy, they went out a lot, they went up a lot. The prices that went down in the basket are the telecom ones, or they stayed flat. Right-hand side of the slide, the telecom spend as proportion of GDP. Again, here, Europe a bit lower than others. And one metric, the last chart, bottom right, is the so-called average revenue per user. It's flat. Again, here depends on the perspectives. If you approach it from an affordability angle, it might be good. If you approach it from an investment and an investors and the shareholder angle, it's of course not good. Now, last 3 slides to look a bit into the technology trends. There are some technologies that are considered, of course, very important. 5G standalone, I would argue, is very important because it is where you get or you reap the real benefits of 5G, because you get the latency, you get the proximity data center, so you can do all the innovation with manufacturing, with the verticals. As you can see there, 5G standalone, we are still behind certain other regions of the world. 15 commercial networks in the Asia Pacific, only 4 in Europe. This means that if the, let's call it consumer 5G is coming, 73% of availability, for the 5G standalone that will be used for the most sophisticated use cases, that's still to come. And that's, I think, very relevant in terms of digital decade. You know that behind the 5G revolution, there is a lot of work with the vendors, with the important European vendors like Ericsson and Nokia. So a lot of innovation and equipment goes into that. On top, there is also a trend towards open radio access networks. There we're working with the traditional vendors and with the new ones. There you see that in terms of deployment and trials, we have a good number, 6 trials and deployment in Europe. But if we break down those boxes, we are good on trials in Open RAN in Europe, not so good in deployment. And so this, I think, should also be relevant and taken into account. I'll skip now to the last 2 slides, also to stay within the time and not to get the ring too fast. Future trends. Here, this is not published data from Ethno. So I'm giving you a bit of a teaser of something that you will be able to see in the coming months coming from Ethno. We're working with Deloitte on what are the future trends on network technology. Let's look at the first 2, 5G standalone and FTTH, FTTX. You will say, well, those are not really future trends. We had a good discussion with Deloitte and we decided, let's leave them in because it's so much CapEx and it's still so much work to do between now and 2030 that we should not give 5G and FTTH for granted as something that has already happened. We are on the path, we are on the way. But looking a bit down the line, we were discussing it. Open radio access network, we believe that it will have an important role. It's about the diversification of the supplier base, but most importantly, it's about the fact that 5G requires a lot of actors and requires a lot of collaboration to create an innovative and a flexible network, one that is secure, one that is sustainable, so on and so forth. And so we see new players working with the established one, and that's gonna be one of the trends going ahead. Then edge computing, of course, that's something we know well. We want to bring data processing closer to the user. That's one of the trends that is going definitely to rule the next 10 years of technology. And then if we look even farther, we are starting to look at the quantum encryption. We need to keep networks secure. Quantum encryption will be a necessary aspect in that, but also in satellite connectivity. How do you integrate terrestrial connectivity with satellite connectivity? We expect this to be a trend in the future, that there will be more and more integration. That's in terms of how the network technology is likely to evolve. Again, not final work. So at the end of June, after the digital assembly, after your digital report, we will have a report on this. The very last one, I'll show you and close. How will people use our networks? That's also ongoing work with ETNO, within ETNO and the GSMA. Network usage, the trends that we expect, more data traffic coming from resolution, from SD to HD, 4K, 8K, probably that doesn't surprise you. High definition live sports, that will be driving data consumption going forward. And then a new trend, the so-called metaversification of use cases. So think of the use cases of today and superpose metaverse on it. That's what will drive data consumption in our networks, AR and VR. And very interestingly, we're starting to work on that AI generated content. Today, everybody speaks about ChatGPT. That's text, that's one thing. What when AI generated content becomes more? It becomes videos, it becomes images. So this will be the 5 key trends that we expect to drive network usage and data traffic that we expect to continue growing. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you very much to this initial deep dive. To the constraint and trends for developing our network. And I think the transition with Florence, who is executive CEO of, deputy executive CEO of Dassault Systèmes, precisely making this opportunity reality for the industry and for people. And the link with virtual reality is critical here. So Florence was taken back in Paris because of a strike, but she accepted to do a presentation remotely. So thank you very much, Florence. So the floor is yours for your trends and for now.
Thank you very much. Eric, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. And sorry, I cannot be with you. I mean, France is under some strikes today again, and I miss not being with you. But nevertheless, I'm very happy to be talking to you, because for us at Dassault Systèmes, digital transformation and what it brings to Europe and how we can make sure that Europe stay at the forefront of digital transformation and the digital business model is super important. So thank you for inviting me. So why do I think it's the right moment to discuss it, and why I'm supporting a lot what you're trying to do with the digital decade? Well, we are at a tipping point when it comes to digital transformation and the impact it has on the industry. Since between 2018 and 2026, the amount of money that is going to be spent worldwide on digital transformation and the services that go with them is going to be multiplied by 4. Why? Because digital, artificial intelligence, virtual twins are a big accelerator to foster innovation, operational efficiency, sustainability, and new business models in all industry, from car industry to consumer industry to energy to life science. And most of the companies that will be created in the next few months and years are going to be AI native, digital native, platform native. So it's super important if we want to foster the next champions of Europe that we are the best in digital. And I must say, we have very good signs in Europe. Well, because first, the global digital champion in 2022 was European, it's Denmark, followed by USA and Singapore, but still it's Denmark, a European country. And then the two very interesting points is that we have first excellent brains, and it proves into the number of patents that we're able to get. In last year, we registered in Europe 76% more patents combining green and digital technology, and I do believe the sustainable revolution will be fed by the digital revolution. So we had 76 more patents than US and 4 times more than China in the combination of green and digital. And second, even if we are not totally there, as per Alessandro, when it comes to connectivity, still we had a lot of broadband and 5G networks investment. And I do believe now what needs to be done is to transform it in order to, for industries, companies, startups to use it and to pioneer new technology. And I do believe that Europe is already working a lot, and we're in the first area in the world working a lot to make it happen with a project like Digital Product Passport, but also Data Act. I really believe in the capability of Data Act to help foster new business model around data. So now we have to be realistic. We kind of, in Europe, missed the platform revolution of the GAFA. We didn't manage to have any GAFAM in Europe. And now that we are at a tipping point with generative AI, with machine learning, with virtual twin, with quantum, it's going to be a second wave, and it's time for us to take positions. And for me, there are a number of priorities that are going to be super important if we want to take positions. And that's going to be the catalyst of the transformation of the industry. First is virtual twin. We are very lucky because with Siemens and Dassault Systèmes, we have kind of the companies that created the virtual twin in Europe, but we really have to continue. Because for me, virtual twin is basically the metaverse before the term metaverse was invented. It's the ability to innovate in the digital world, create a new car, a new power plant, a new small modular reactor, or even a new virtual city in order to be quicker at doing the best possible product, the most sustainable product, and optimize it in the virtual world. So it's a huge accelerator of innovation. So virtual twin is key. We are good, but we have to be cautious to continue to be good and to continue to launch projects and to foster it in each and every industry. And I'm particularly worried on SMEs who are a bit not as quick to adapt it as some others. Then there is next level automation. As you know, manufacturing plants are moving a lot and jobs are changing. And with the virtual twin of the plant and the automation that go with it, you can really change the way, make your plant more flexible. But of course, you need to continue the investment in companies like Schneider Electric and the likes to make it happen. Then there is an area where I'm a bit worried. It's distributed infrastructure and cloud. It's Web4, but it's also our ability to get to make sure that we have sovereign cloud in Europe. Why? Because today, the value of a business model, the value of a company is a lot within the data of the company. And if these data are hosted by US company or by Chinese company or Asian companies, they can be taken by these non-European players, and all the IP can basically be retrofitted. So there is a huge urgency at making sure that we create sovereign cloud in Europe, and that will make sure that we stick with our data in Europe, but also that we have cloud actors that are innovative enough for us in Europe. And then there are 3 other topics that are for me very interesting, very important for the future of our industry. That's next generation computing. And here I'm rather optimistic because a lot of the publication on quantum, a lot of the best researchers and scientists in the world on quantum come from Europe. 35% of the publication of quantum computing have been done in Europe, but China and US are really investing a lot. And why do I think that it's going to be a game changer? It's because with the power of calculation of quantum, you will be able to accelerate your cycle of innovation by 1,000, if not 1 million times. When it comes to discover new medicine, when it comes to discover new sustainable materials, when it comes to adapting your business model or learning from your business model. If you combine generative AI and quantum computing, the cycle of innovation will be totally reduced to a minimum. And then, so we absolutely have to be in that fight. We absolutely have to be at the three levels: the quantum computing, the platform that you put, the software that you put on the quantum computing, and then the application of the quantum computing. And these are different investments. Then there is AI, linked to quantum computing, of course, but apply AI. How we, in Europe, are we able to benefit from generative AI to make sure that we introduce it in our business model in order to benefit from it quickly enough? And then there is the future of programming. And we have a lot of funding on that in Europe, but our ability to be able to develop new ways to do software 2.0, low, no code, will be a game changer for all the platform digital native companies. So we are at a tipping point. I think we're living in a very interesting moment because we really can help Europe to go to the next level in all this technology. And what's going to be key is, for me, two things: education, make sure that our schools and universities adapt to these new needs, and that we have the right profiles that are going to be able to bring us to the next business model in the industry. And then our ability also to push for that technology, TOOS technology, thanks to European project, if possible, cross borders is possible between many countries, because I really do believe that for that kind of investment, European scale is a necessity. And if we do it at country level, that won't work. But that's going to be super interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence. I think you have cut across a lot of the targets and the objectives that we have. A lot of words that were mentioned by you and Alessandro really make an echo to our target on connectivity, on quantum, on multi-country projects, local digital twins, for instance. I think you have, it's a very good start. So now I'd like to open the floor here with our participants. Asking whether you have maybe a couple of points you would like to add to that. I mean, what has not been mentioned so far, which is important for you? Who would like to start? I'm looking at around. So, Blaise, do you want to have a go?
Yes. Yes. So, very good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Blaise Tartamimi. So I am president of Semi Europe. Semi is a global semiconductor industry association, and I think most of the comments were made for the digital transformation. The semiconductor industry needs to be ready to enable these ones, and the semiconductor industry is today sitting around 600 billion in revenue globally, and this has taken over 50 years to get here. But with the digital transformation, is driving exponentially, the growth of the industry, and it's expected to reach 1 trillion, almost double by 2030. And the mega trends driving that are, as I already mentioned, the 5G, the 6G, even, the ultra high performance computing, whether it's edge or cloud or, quantum computing, neuromorphic computing, AI, connectivity, automotive, of course, with the LiDAR, whether it's AV or EV. So all these trends are really driving the digitization world. And I think we saw during the COVID, the digital really kicked in, to enable, the economy to continue to move forward. So the semiconductor industry, it's instrumental in order to enable this growth and all these new applications to be in place in a timely manner. What are the headwinds facing this 1 trillion by 2030? And I think 2 days ago. So the EU Chips Act was kicked off. This is instrumental. This is, I think it was really exciting for Europe for this tool to be released so that it can support the growth. From innovation, where Europe is world leader in terms of really providing timely technology solutions. To, of course, we have many, whether it's, wafer fabrication or equipment, world number ones with the Infineons, NXP, ST, as well as ASML and other equipment providers. So Europe already has a phenomenal ecosystem that can really, support the digital transformation. There are four headwinds that, we need to be realistic in order to be able to, flag them and able to address them. And this can only be addressed collectively. One is geopolitics. And as you know, we hear a lot of that now. This is, what Eric mentioned, is a new trend. This is a new trend. This is what's happening now. And, it continues, started with the Russia-Ukraine war, which is ongoing, impacted the industry significantly. The sanctions on China, this continues to be a big, topic to be addressed, globally. So geopolitics has, really is high on the agenda in terms of enabling that. And this needs to be addressed, of course, at government levels, but also at industry CEOs level, is how do you find the business model that can enable us to continue to grow, and be part of the global ecosystem. But of course, be at the forefront where Europe is already, strong and to maintain competitive advantage of what we do today. This is one. The second one is the sustainability, the green. I think it is a key driving force. And the semiconductor industry is one of the contributors, but can also be, part of the solution. And it's driving towards net zero. This is high on the agenda at every CEO in the industry, whether it's equipment, material, abatement, manufacturing. They're all have very high on the agenda KPIs. How do they get there? Whether it's recycling, whether it's, chemicals, gases, and so on. So this is really an area where the semiconductor industry can provide, great solutions to really towards the net zero goals. The third one is, of course, is the talent, workforce development. So this is global. And, we see with the investments that we have seen, in announcements last year in 2022 and continues this year with Infineon in Dresden and TSMC announcements, this is going to create a tremendous amount of new wafer fabs to meet this 1 trillion demand by 2030. But of course, in order to do that, workforce development is of paramount importance. We need people to do that. And I think we need to really collectively work together to address that, whether it's university, whether it's schools, and look at all the tools and the means we have in order to really continue to keep the talent pipeline. And I think one additional element to the talent pipeline is really diversity. This is also very, very important, and there's data that supports that. Diverse workforce development shows very high performance corporations, and I think this is what we also need. And I also know, from our member companies, this is also very high on the agenda of every CEO. It's a KPI they need to work on, not only at the working level, but also at the senior and executive level to make sure that, the diversity is very visible. And last but not least, which is also geopolitically driven, is the supply chain disruptions. And we saw the impact, during COVID. This really basically put the whole world at standstill. And the biggest, hit that the industry faced was the automotive industry. This continues to be, influenced, but as I said, it's not a pandemic influence, it's more geopolitics influence. And we're looking also at industries to collaborate, including, you hear logistics now coming into the game so that they can facilitate, timely arrivals of all, again, what is needed in order to be able to, it will take a while, for the resilient supply chain to kick in, of course, with as I said, with the release of the European Chips Act and all the instruments that it's provided. But of course, this will take time for that, and first is capability, capacity, and then future is really supply chain resilience. And in that sense, we need to look at how do we mitigate that in order to be able to allow, to really continue the exponential growth and to be a leader in the world and the digital transformation. And I hope that's...
This is excellent, Les. This is exactly what we expected, and you have echoed a lot of the elements that we have already. I mean, on skills, this is a tremendous chapter of our digital decade. Resilience is also one. I think you have also reinforced the elements on the geopolitical background. I mean, I think Christine Lagarde recently mentioned the fragmentation of the global economy recently in a quite an important speech. And now it's really important that we have taken due note of that. But I see that Leo would like to give a compliment.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Leo Baumann. I represent Nokia, and I would like to add a few words on the strength of Europe and also the technology trends. So regarding strength, I mean, certainly technology-wise, it's in the area of communication networks. It's clear that connectivity plays a key role for European digitalization, and that's where most of European strengths are actually lying in mobile networks. We have European companies have a global market share of 45%. That's Nokia and Ericsson combined. In fiber networks, Nokia alone has a market share of 39% globally in gigabit passive optical networks. And then in submarine networks, ASN, Alcatel Submarine Networks, which belongs to Nokia, has also between 30 and 40% globally. So that's where Europe is very strong. Then second, where Europe's strength and opportunities are, is really R&D collaboration. It's public-private partnership, European funding, Hexa-X that leads to the path towards 6G. It's open standardization, 3GPP, ETSI, and it's patents, our patent regime, our current patent licensing regime that altogether all drive openness in Europe in a very positive way. And the third point I would like to mention regarding our strength is certainly Europe's industrial base. So there's a strong industrial base in many sectors and a very high demand right now for connectivity, enhanced connectivity, digitalization, and we have also many enablers that can provide the solutions to the industrial base in Europe. And then trends, I mean, Alessandro has mentioned already many as well, Florence from Dassault. I would just like to add 6G, so the networks of the future that sense, think, and act. The next generation fiber also that is coming, very powerful, 100 GPON, gigabit passive optical networks. The metaverses, as we have not seen them before, so you don't have to choose anymore between being in the real world or in the virtual world. You can be at the same time in both. There will be a real overlay of the virtual world, a fusion of the two, and that in the consumer space, but also in the enterprise space and in the industry space. And then, of course, disaggregated clouds, AI and ML will strongly pick up also in networks, blockchain, Web3, where Nokia has also applications that we're driving forward.
Thank you very much, Leo. I think it's very important to hear also from you as a key player of the ecosystem, what you see as the key trends. And of course, the digital decade is not only about technological leadership, but it's also about values and about making sure that this technology is working for people and from users. And we have here in the room experts that could shed a bit of light on that. And I see that Marianne from the BEUC would like to complete our picture.
Thank you very much indeed. So my name is Marianne Fernandez. I work at BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, representing the interest of consumers across Europe. And I'm leading the digital team that we have. Indeed, the big thing that I'm missing from what we have heard this morning is a bit the consumer perspective, because Europe without consumers, without serving people, society, good enough. And in fact, I would dare to say that one of the big successes of the European Union is to bring more benefits to consumers. And the European Union has been a trendsetter in the sense that we have set the trends around the globe in the way we want to technology to serve people. For example, let's think of starting from telecom market liberalization. This is a big success of the European Union, with more competition leading to more choice, better prices, more affordability, more quality. Without this competition, the EU would not be where we are now. Unfortunately, now what we see is more a trend towards market concentration in this area, and we're a bit concerned by that because we think Europe should build on these successes and not go backwards and go more towards market centralization. We see indeed a lot of developments in the sector. We have heard already from various team speakers today about more advances in fiber, also 5G, even the next generation of 6G. However, we see that the current deployment is not really up to the standards that consumers expect. Our members, consumer organizations around Europe, receive many complaints from consumers, for example, that they feel that the promises behind the 5G programs that they have contracted are not up to the quality, and instead of having more quality, they feel it's more like 3G or 4G plus. So we need to make sure that we don't enter into the hype without delivering on the promises for consumers, and that's where regulation and concrete targets to protect and benefit people are beneficial. Likewise, another success of the European Union in terms of rule setting and trend setting, it's data protection, for example. Around the world, Professor Greenleaf has shown that there are more than 150 laws around Europe. The first data protection law was done in Sweden, which is quite good in the sense that now we have the presidency from Sweden. And since then, since the 50s, more than 150 countries have data protection laws, and most of them are inspired by our most recent law, the GDPR, in this area. And this is something that Europe should cherish and should keep looking forward to ensure that technology keeps serving people by having the rules that are there to address market failures and to ensure that companies do not only think about growth, but they also think about how their technology and development can serve society and people. We don't advocate for innovation for the sake of it, but innovation that actually protects people, because currently we hear things like Europe has failed into get a European GAFA. In fact, in our view, we think the future should not be having European GAFAs. Why? Because we see that this business model is not there to serve people. Why? We see data exploitation where consumers are manipulated on a daily basis. Every time consumers are aware of the amount of data that is being collected and processed illegally, I would even say, they are surprised and worried. And most of the times they don't know that they have rights and companies have obligations that they are not respecting. So stepping up not only on setting the right rules, but also on enforcement is a big priority that we hope the European Union endeavors right now. We have some rules, sometimes not enough rules. That's why we, for example, want to ensure advances in the AI Act, and also look forward to the next mandate of the European Commission to see what more can be done, but also enforcement and ensuring that not only we have the best rules, but these can be enforced. And more in the general level, beyond building on the successes of the European Union, the future that we see is one where everybody has access to the internet through an affordable, high-speed and high-quality connection, where everybody should enjoy an open, fair and transparent environment in the online world, where there's a balance of power between businesses and consumers, citizens, where business models are respectful of their rights and freedoms, but not as a part of a declaration or of a speech, but really in practice, because currently we see some business models that are not really delivering for people. And this is for us really important. And so we need to ensure that Europe moves and keeps protecting consumers by default and by design, putting a focus on the most vulnerable ones and ensuring that, yeah, indeed, we don't, again, focus on innovation and growth just for the sake of it, but actually what kind, that we talk about what kind of innovation and growth is what would make Europe a better continent, what is going to make the European Union a better place to be, and what we can learn also from our jurisdictions and impart our wisdom to others as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. It was extraordinarily useful for us, as you know. I mean, for the first time, in the world, I think we have a plan which is both engaging on values and the thing that you have said. You may have read them also in the objective of the digital decade on an open-centered, a human-centered digital environment, on inclusiveness, on making sure that it's really fit for people. And we have, of course, the Declaration on Rights and Principles that is critical. So now we are invited to implement this now, and this is the critical element for that. And we will maybe come back to that in the second session. Maybe we need to, we have very few time for this session still, so maybe we can take a couple of interventions, but very short and to the point, please. So I think Molly was raising his hand before, and then Claire. And then I think we will close this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a really pleasure to be here. I'm representing the OECD based in Paris. And I'm a bit of a data geek, just so you know. And one of the things I wanted to help support you with, and I've had some conversations with Kasia about this already, is we do have a database platform called the Going Digital Toolkit that has a lot of data and indicators on some of the key trends that we've talked about. One thing I just wanted to contribute to the debate, I'm working with Jeremy Bailenson. He's head of the Human Interaction Lab at Stanford on a chapter on virtual reality for our upcoming publication. And I'm learning a lot about this. You know, you hear about it, it's the buzzword, right? We're all going to be in the metaverse. And I think what I'm learning from him is that that's probably not going to be the case. There's a lot of reasons why lots of things we do won't go into immersive environments. One of them is simulator sickness. For example, if you get car sick in a car, which I certainly do, you're not going to be able to use these virtual worlds. And so what we're doing in this chapter is trying to identify kind of the use cases where we think this technology is going to be helpful, and then other use cases where maybe not. And probably our lives as office workers, it's probably not going to help us too much. I also wanted to mention I'm also working with a colleague on a neural network model to nowcast the growth of the ICT sector. So as you're looking for indicators to put into your report, this is really, I think, kind of a frontier piece of work. We're following in the footsteps of our colleagues in the economics department who nowcast weekly GDP growth. So I'll stop there, but happy to help support you in the process.
Thank you very much, Molly. I think we have an inextinguishable eagerness for data and facts. So I think the more you can give us, the more we will be using. So Claire, maybe.
Thank you. I'm Claire Fernandez. I'm the Executive Director of EDRI, European Digital Rights. We are a network of 47 NGOs active in Europe to protect human rights in the digital age. So obviously, we'll have also a little bit of a different angle on today's discussions, and building on what Marianne has said, that the digital decade really feels more like a business plan than a policy program. I know we have the Declaration of Rights and Principles, but it looks like more like an afterthought than something that is really embedded in the program. And we want to challenge the fact that the digitalization is pushed really as a vehicle for market and economical growth. And the assumption that AI, big data, the cloud, and other buzzword that we heard today will be a goal per se, and then we will deal with the harms on society and people afterwards. We need to also learn the lessons of some of the first digital revolutions where we were too late to deal with harms, as Marianne has said, on platforms, and Europe has put forward some regulation now. So now is also the time to think about the way we want that new waves of technologies to start from the start, centering people. And again, you mentioned in the video today about centering people. For us, it's really important that privacy, accessibility, dignity of people, but also the huge injustice, not only between business and people, but also between those bearing the brunt of technological harms, also the invisible labor that is put to actually maintain these technologies and that Europe is starting to regulate on. And centering people should also be reflected in your process. The fact that today, we got invited last minute, but also that mainly industry and member state authorities are being consulted in the making of the report is a huge concern for us. And we would, urge you to also make sure that you deliberately involve civil society, impacted community, and representative of users, of people. It was also shared by somebody in the chat, where is the people's perspective, where is the user's perspective, and what is the European way we want to do, especially not replicating the business model of big tech, as it was mentioned, and making sure that public money, public investment, European money also goes into the European and the public interest.
For being, straight. And I think we need all to be straight here. I mean, a couple of comments maybe, because these are important points. I think this is for the first time that a country or nation, I mean, the Europe in particular, in globally, is putting forward such an agenda to which everyone commits, including objectives, which are precisely mentioning the type of thing that you listed, a human-centered environment. So there is a decision which is hard law in Europe, where member states and the Commission have committed to move forward. Of course, this is not because we say things, that things happen. And this is the other leg of the digital decade, is precisely to have conceived a governance system whereby member states will have to discuss with us on these issues. And Camilla mentioned the guidance for roadmap. Member states will have to provide roadmap in which all of them will have to consult stakeholders, will have to explain how they are going to measure progress vis-à-vis these objectives, which is precisely, as you and Marianne said, to build an ecosystem that works for people and that is also commensurate to our expectations in terms of values and rights. So I think that today's discussion, and we are extremely open, everything is being public, and we expect to have a lot of contributions from the different horizons, from different perspectives, and we will take that into account. And today's discussion is precisely to try to make it effective. So what shall we be taking in our report, in our work with member states, to make it effective? With member states, we have now also, as you have seen in the background notes that we have circulated around, we have an expert group dedicated to that. So we are meeting, twice, one every 2 months with them to really discuss on the progress, on the way we can help also with multi-country projects in using Europe tools. So that's exactly the topic of the discussion today, how we can make it working in practice. But I think the framework is exactly the framework that is encapsulating the sort of concern you would like to see addressing. So that's now maybe a good transition to the second session. On the challenges that we are facing. But before that, I wanted just to offer Alessandro or Florence one word, if they want to have one word to just close this session before we move on. Alessandro?
Merci. Maybe one line, which is, we reflect also a lot from an industry perspective on the balance between on how do you advance the European values. And one realization that I believe I also came to as a citizen is that you can buy the technology of the others and regulate it, or you can try to have that business plan and build your own with your own values inside. I think where we were as an observer, and here I'm going beyond the ethno position, where we were until the previous commission, probably it was still in a mode in which we were seeing with the consumer internet, the technology of the others coming, and we were trying to react by regulating it. What I have seen, or how I read this commission, is more an attempt to create the industrial tools to have our own, with our own values. I think that this is gonna be good ultimately if we succeed.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. France.
Thank you, Eric, and I couldn't agree more with Alessandro. It's going to be good. I think indeed in Europe we have unique values. We want to push for those values, and this is what we are trying to do. And I think there are unique debates in Europe around ethics of AI, ethics of generative AI, and I think we can also take a huge step up on this and like do a GDPR effect, impose it on the world if we do it well, and there are good ways to work on AI ethics that we have worked on in Europe. And second, I will say what is also super important with me, and is a bit linked to the next debate, is what do we stand for? In Europe, we stand for value. We also stand for fight against climate change. We are at a unique moment where I do believe digital technologies, virtual twins in particular, but not only, generative AI, machine learning, can really help us take a big step up when it comes to climate change. Some studies have proven that 80% of the solution against the reduction of CO2 are achievable. 80% of the reduction are achievable if we develop some of the technologies at scale, including virtual twins, AI, machine learning. And in Europe, we're really trying to promote this. My company, that's a system, we have committed that by 2025, 18 months from now, 2/3 of our revenues will come from our sustainable solutions that make our 300,000 customers more sustainable. I think we are unique in Europe in our willingness to do that. And therefore, it's going to be a game changer for the business we are going to develop in Europe. It's going to be a game changer for the future of sustainability in the world. And hopefully, it's going to set the pace for the rest of the world. So I'm super enthusiastic that we are living in such a moment, and we can, in Europe, make that happen for the world.
Thank you so much, Florence, and you are welcome to stay and for the other session of the discussion. I would like to now give the floor to Camilla for closing formally this session.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you to everyone for participating in this introductory session. I just wanted to say that what I hear here is very much encouraging, because now we have together the governance system, very clear vision, that's one thing, which is translated in objectives, which rightly Eric also pointed out, because the targets are the focus, but objectives are extremely important, and we'll also monitor what is happening and how the countries are fulfilling also the general objectives, which are much broader, and also respecting the consumer data protection issues. What we did not mention, there is also, of course, declaration of principles, which is closely connected with what we are doing with the report, and will be also monitoring on this side. And what we also have, we have tools, not only the governance side, which is super important, but we also have the possibilities to support industry and member states with multi-country projects. And we see huge interest from member states currently for different types of multi-country projects, and are working very closely with them to make them happen. So let's use this system. Let's use what we have put together. Let's use this very strong and first in digital governance system to deliver on the vision and the goals. And with this, I have to very much thank you. I will join you at the end also of the session. I have to unfortunately go for the next meetings, but I wish you a very fruitful discussion, and we'll be for sure in touch. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Camilla. Let's move to the second session. I have to say that there is a lot of reactions on the chat that we are going to reply in one way or another, but in any case, it's very important food for thought and a very important question that we see here. So now this second session is precisely a discussion about making it real. So how are we going to work together from the different direction of the ecosystem, policymakers with NGOs, with the business to make it happening, to make this digital decade a success. And here this session will discuss the challenges that we are facing, not only the economical challenges, but also the societal challenges. And there are many. Maybe also a look at what are the strategic areas on which we need to focus, because of course digital transformation is everywhere. So in a sense, there is a strong need for focusing on in the areas that are critical for our future, and we also are aiming at discussing possible concrete policy actions that we would like to recommend as part of the digital decade. So for helping us to figuring out all these aspects, we have two outstanding speakers again. I would like to give the floor to Alex. Solveig has been it has been impossible for her to join physically, so Alex will present his thought, and then we have Paul. I will not present Paul here in Brussels, but he is going to give us further complementary insight on this aspect. So, Alex, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric. So my name is Axel Domeyer. I'm a partner with McKinsey. So I'm a partner with McKinsey, focusing on digital transformation, working in particular with governments, not just in Europe, but also outside of Europe. And what I want to share today is the perspective of the McKinsey Global Institute, right? So we have done some research on where Europe is in the digital transformation, what are the challenges, and what are possible roads ahead. Let me first start by saying that the digital decade, in our view, is if not the most important, then certainly the most foundational policy program that the European Union is driving at the moment, right? So we do need the digital decade to enable and to fund the digital, the green transition. We do need the digital decade to strengthen the resilience, strategic resilience of Europe, and we do need the digital decade to address the growth issue that the European Union countries have had over especially the past decade, right? So growth in Europe was about roughly on par with the United States from 1970 to 2010. And since then, growth in Europe has relatively slowed, right? And we believe, so based on the research we've done with the MGI, the McKinsey Global Institute, is that one of the key reasons underlying the growth issue of the European Union is corporate underperformance driven by our lack in the digital transformation, right? So then let me unpack this a little bit, right? So what do we mean by this? So first of all, corporate underperformance shows itself in three areas in particular, right? So we have lower return on invested capital, 20% lower than in the United States in sort of big European corporations, larger than 1 billion euro of revenue. We have lower revenue growth, 40% lower revenue growth, and we have 40% less R&D spending. So this is quite concerning in a way, right? Because we're moving to a winner takes most economy, as we say, right? So today's lack of investment and R&D in particular can translate into sort of a faster relative decline in the future, right? So these numbers are actually something that we believe is important to address. And that, of course, requires sort of understanding the driving forces of this, right? And we think that, or like the research we've done has shown that the main driver of this is actually technology, right? So the digital transformation is behind in Europe, and this doesn't just mean kind of like let's say the first generation of the digital transformation, which was all about digitizing consumer products, consumer internet, digitizing business processes. But, this was kind of like within the traditional industry sectors, enabled by the ICT sector, which is a separate sector. Now we are increasingly moving into a world where technology is transversal, right? So we have technologies such as cloud, applied AI, distributed infrastructure that really drive value creation across all of the sectors, right? So the World Economic Forum is estimating that about 70% of new value, right? So growth on top of what's there already will be digitally enabled, right? So enabled by technologies such as next generation computing, future of programming. I mean, some of these were already mentioned today. And we wondered, you know, like where does Europe actually stand on these transversal technologies today? And the result is that we are in Europe quite good on next generation materials. Actually, that's kind of the one area where Europe is leading the world. Future of clean tech, that's an area where Europe is at least at par, right, with the next best world region. But especially on the digital technologies, right? And you have these on the handout, and I think people on the WebEx can see it hopefully on the slide, right? So next level automation, future of connectivity, distributed infrastructure. We have a bit of a relative gap in terms of innovation. That's where we actually patents were mentioned, right? So patents were actually relatively strong, but even on innovation metrics, Europe is not typically leading on these technologies. We have larger gaps on production, so meaning, for instance, investment, right? So venture capital investment, new production facilities. So here there's a strong gap, and also on adoption, right? So for instance, the density of robots in production facilities is lower than in other world regions, right? So on these kind of metrics, we researched the relative position of European corporations, and we found sort of these significant gaps across these transversal technologies, right? So what does this mean? And so we believe this is kind of like the big challenge, right? And you asked us for challenges, Eric, right? So we give kind of like our view on what is difficult about sort of the starting position of the digital decade. So what does this mean for the digital decade? Which strategic areas can you focus on, right? So we definitely believe that the digital compass very clearly is a very useful framework, right, to address these challenges. So you have a few things in there: digital skills, gigabit connectivity, digital public services, digital identity, which we would say, I mean, these are the table stakes of the digital transformation, right? Where it's quite important to put these in place quickly. And we believe that the approach of kind of like tracking member states' trajectories towards these goals and really pushing this. I mean, there are recipes how to do this, right? Digital identity is not something that, you know, you have to invent. It's more of an adoption and a scaling problem. But then there are some things that really in the digital compass, right, that really could help addressing this transversal technology challenge, right? So doubling the number of unicorns, 75% of companies using cloud, AI, big data, the 10,000 climate neutral edge nodes, first computer with quantum acceleration. So I think these are really targets that can help drive sort of Europe's position on transversal technologies. And the question then is, how do you get there, right? And I've probably already exceeded the 5 minutes allotted to me, right? So let me just sort of like throw sort of a few ideas into the discussion, right? And you can read sort of like the more detailed version of this in our Securing European Competitiveness report published by MGI last September. So 3 areas which we believe are important from sort of an action perspective, right? The first one is playing really at the full scale of Europe. I mean, the market in Europe is large, but oftentimes companies in Europe cannot kind of fully address this market. So I mean, just to give you one example, right? So startups typically scale in the United States first, even if they come from Europe, and then they come back to Europe, right, to scale further, which shows that there are obviously some obstacles in the still incomplete single market, right? So One idea we put forward in the report is creating what we call a 28th regulatory regime for specific companies. I mean, obviously that doesn't work for every company, but for high growth companies in areas relevant to the digital transformation, you can consider sort of setting up a 28th regime where if you opt into this, you only have to fulfill those rules, but you are allowed to operate in all European countries. So that's it's a bit more of like, let's say, structural change, right? And more difficult to realize. There are also some, like let's say, quicker wins, easier wins, such as improving the investment landscape, enabling, for instance, pension funds to invest more into alternative asset classes such as private equity and venture capital, which would close the investment gap that European startups are facing. Increasing speed, quite important. Leith, you mentioned the desire of the semiconductor industry to invest in Europe, and there's obviously at the moment quite a bit of support, right, from like in different world regions for making these investments. And what we hear from the industry is, like having sort of like speedy processes and assurances, right, to like which support will be available. How can we plan? I mean, this seems to be an area where Europe can still do more, be faster, right? So that's definitely an area that we would highlight, increasing the speed of everything we do in the digital transformation. And then the last thing is about leveling the playing field for European firms. Thinking about ideas, how can you protect is, I mean, a strong word, right? But how can you make sure that early startups are not immediately exposed to the full force of sort of the big global technology corporations competing with them and acquiring them very fast, right? Are there ideas how you can, like similar to what other economies have done in the past, how you can sort of delay this exposure to global competition a little bit, right? To allow these companies to grow a bit faster and then be able to compete globally. So these are our ideas. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Axel. I think it was really a fascinating exposure on the role of technological innovation, the investment gap that we have also in this technological race, the importance of speed, and of course, the question of scaling up. I mean, we have here a unicorn, so we expect to have some insight on this from you, Damir, later on. But maybe before that, Paul, I think the floor is now yours to complete the picture.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And by the way, since you didn't introduce me, I'll introduce myself briefly. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Hofheinz, and I'm the president and co-founder of the Lisbon Council, which, despite its name, is a think tank very much based here in Brussels. We're named for the famous Lisbon strategy, which remains the mission statement of the organization, even if the EU has moved on and does other things now. Look, I had 4 points I wanted to make, and I'll try to make them quickly, but I apologize. This is a very rich and also very important discussion that we're having here today. And let me start by thanking the European Commission for opening it so early. It's a very good sign that we are taking stock of things now and thinking in particular about what we might do next in the next round of digital policy making. Eric, I also, like Axel, I wanted to take you up on your invitation to talk maybe a bit more about the challenges and things that have gone wrong. I'll skip over the part where we might praise what's happened in the last few years and instead focus on things that maybe didn't happen that should have, and in particular on areas where maybe we've been a little too quick to award ourselves a success based on rhetorical success in one area where things that were technically maybe not delivering us the goals that the policies were intended for, intended to achieve. I have 2 things in particular in mind there. The first one is this very famous concept of digital sovereignty. We talk about this all the time, and I wanted to say a little bit about what it might or might not mean. Going all the way back to the beginning, the concept came along during the German presidency a few years ago, you may remember, and the German presidency immediately announced a conference on digital sovereignty. And I thought, oh, that's great. I'm going to go to that conference. I'm going to learn what this is all about. And by the way, they asked me to speak. I didn't have a clue what it was about, but I thought, okay, fine. As long as I'm 4th or 5th, I'll know something by the time it's my time to speak. But what I found was that all the other speakers were trying to figure out what it meant too. And everyone had a different definition. It was something that no one could possibly object to, although, by the way, some people did object to it. I don't. I actually understand very well what we're talking about here, which is we don't want to be passive consumers of other people's ideas and values in this area. It's a very easy thing to accept and understand why we would want and need a policy in that area. The problem is when it comes to policy, it can be interpreted in 1,000 ways, and it means 10,000 things to 100,000 different people. Some people see it and have used it as a frankly protectionist agenda. Others have seen it as an excuse or a reason for doing other things too. So what I wanted to say was that we maybe need to go back and look again at our concept of digital sovereignty and ask ourselves whether the policies we have are delivering it. My own contribution that day, and one of the reasons I'm telling a story from 5 years ago is I'm struck that 5 years later, I'm tempted to say the exact same thing I said at the beginning of this discussion. And what I said that day was, Europe will not have digital sovereignty until we have companies that are capable of giving excellent products and excellent services, not just excellent, but better products and better services at better prices here in Europe and on global markets. And I really think it comes down to that, because if you look at how this, quote, digital sovereignty problem came up, it's because of the success of companies elsewhere. We have American companies that come here, and what do they bring here? A lot of products, but they also bring all their values. Their way of doing business comes in with those products. And by the way, the same with the Chinese, a completely different set of values, where, by the way, we've been way too passive. We've sat here and accepted a completely unacceptable Chinese way of doing business because their products are cheap. That's right off the, should not be happening in my view, by the way. Where is Europe in all this? My point is this, that if we're really serious about spreading our values in the global economy, we need companies that are successful that take them out into the world for us. And that's a little bit what I'm missing. I made a little quick list here of major legislative initiatives, DSA, DMA, more recently Fair Share, the emerging cloud certification standards. Have any of those policies given us more digital autonomy? They might or might not be bad ideas. In fact, I think there are a lot of very good ideas in them. But is sheltering our companies from the pressure of the most excellent companies in the world, does that give us more digital sovereignty? I'm not sure that it does. And I'd like to see a little more direct reckoning on this when we go back and rethink the policies there. Now, my second point is on tools. Because in the process of running this legislative juggernaut, and an enormous amount has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, is we've overlooked what, in my opinion, could have been the most important piece of this puzzle, which is the internal market. And to go way back, I'm an old timer now, to go way back to the debates in the 1990s that Jacques Delors led, the internal market was to be there to give us the size and the scale that would allow our companies to develop and grow and do exactly what I was implying in my first point. And we've very much neglected it. We don't talk about it very much, and we don't do very much about it. And my argument going forward would be we need to go back to this and not just revise it and pay more attention to it, but give it a very modern spin. Because I think the internal market is absolutely needed in the Green Deal, in the European Green Deal. We need to be able to develop these companies and these technologies and take them out to scale into the world, so we're not having to put Chinese solar panels on our roof, which I'm doing right now. I don't quite understand why we sit here and don't use the most powerful instrument we have, which is our own market. Because that's basically what this is about, isn't it? All these European and Chinese companies are coming here because they want to sell technology to us. We want to sell technology into our own market too, with the level of success that they're able to do. So I guess that would be my first thing, the internal market to give us the scale we need. I have to take you up on a little bit of a side issue, but I think it's an important one because Camilla asked us to talk about holes in the digital agenda going forward. And I see two very important ones. I have a very good friend who's moved back to Estonia now, Lucas Ilves. He's actually the CIO of Estonia. And we did a paper a couple of years ago together about next generation European digital agenda. And it was an incredibly fun paper to write because basically we just had lunch about 6 times and talked everything through. And by the time we had many napkins worth of notes, we sat down and wrote them up as the things that we were able to agree on. And one of the issues we discussed was, do we need treaty change? Because we always discuss that in Brussels. It's a perennial here. And we came to the conclusion that yes, we do. as long as it was limited to two very concrete things. And the two concrete things that we thought were very important were, first of all, cybersecurity. Now, why do I say that? If you ask this famous Brussels question, where do we need more Europe? Well, to me, it's just shouting out that we need more Europe on cybersecurity. We're weak there, it's fragmented. I understand whenever you say that, the people at ENISA go crazy. By the way, at ENISA, they don't share things. I don't know. But if we can have European competition policy and we can have European trade policy, why can't we have a European cybersecurity policy too that goes well beyond the NIS2 directive and essentially federalizes, yes, I've used that word, federalizes cybersecurity. I think we need to go there. And the other one, a little controversially, was on skills. And the reason we thought that is because, my God, we talk about skills. We've talked about it here again this morning. I have been to 10,000 conferences where we all agree we need to do more about skills. We never do anything about skills. We do very little. It remains a sort of rhetorical position that we need to do more about skills. What we were saying was, let's get muscular about it. Let's declare this a crisis. We had a financial crisis. Okay, education and training outside of European competences. We know that. A couple of years ago, we had a financial crisis. And what did we do? We went out and got the tools that we needed to come back and address it in an all-European way. I think the same is true with skills. You have a situation in Scandinavia, 95% of people using the internet there. You have a situation in the South, in Italy in particular, half the people there can't go on the internet. This is a European problem and not just an Italian one. And I think the sooner we say this is a European problem and we say, stand by, there are going to be transfers. We quit being shy and impatient about that. We declare it an area where we understand we need to get new powers in this area and we attack it with the proper program that gives us every European digital at the end of it. Those are the two big holes I see in the agenda. And maybe the fourth, just a little advice on the level of policy. I think all policies need two things to work. They have two legs. They need to be technically correct and they need to be politically viable. And everything I've just talked about going forward needs to work on that level. We need policies that are well designed and give us the results we need. We can't just tack the label digital sovereignty on the law and say, okay, we've got digital sovereignty now because we're requiring any cloud providers to have a minority stake in anything happening here in Europe. I'm not sure that gives anyone any digital sovereignty. I'm sure that helps a lot of European companies that have lobbied for it, but we're not talking about digital sovereignty. They need to work on a technical level and they need to work politically, which means they need to be explainable, explicable, supported, the kinds of things that people vote for. And if we can pair up those two things, we can have a revolution here. Because I forget who it was. I think it was you, Leo. You gave a very excellent resume of all the talent and all the skills and all of the immense intelligence that we have here. We can do this. We can become first in the world on digital technology. But we need to set the goal and we need to build the policies behind it that deliver it. And we need to be humble with ourselves. Not assume that we've gotten it just because we have a lot of fancy policies with big names. We need to make sure that the whole package is taking us forward. That's what I wanted to say, and thanks for the opportunity.
Paul, as always, you are extremely stimulating, and thank you very much for linking all with what we are doing with the past. I was reading recently the old paper of Jacques Delors, the white paper on growth, competitiveness, and employment from '93. And you got a lot of things that we are trying to deal with by then. One comment on your 2 points on skills and cybersecurity treaty change. The beauty of the digital decade is that we can work with member states on these issues because we have a joint commitment. So we don't need a treaty change to work on skills. We have committed to reach a level of basic skills for 80% and ICT specialists. And now the question now is what we need to be doing. And we have a structured dialogue that is extremely efficient to do that. But in any case, if you want to have a further dive on that, maybe given in the context of the decade, a policy paper from the Lisbon Council would be extremely welcome also to help us. But maybe now that we can open the discussion for all participants, I see Leo emerging. I would like also to have the opinion of Damir, because in a sense, you are an example of a success story of a global company emerging from Europe. So I need to have your views. But before, maybe Leo, please.
Yeah, shall we structure that in two parts? So first to talk about challenges and then about strategic focus areas. So I would start with challenges. And Paul, fantastic intervention. I would like to comment on all the points you made: skills, cybersecurity. But the most pressing one for me, and maybe if I get a chance to have a further intervention, I will also address the points of skills and cybersecurity. But the most pressing one is really the digital sovereignty point and strengthening European companies. And here I must say the biggest challenge for Nokia right now is the threat of bad EU regulation. And it's not coming from DG Connect, don't worry, Eric, but it's a proposal that DG Grow is considering to push through the Commission next week. They have drafted a proposal to heavily intervene in the patent licensing market of standard essential patents in Europe. And the proposal lacks a complete understanding of market realities. It's unbalanced, it's badly drafted, and it's a clear regulatory overkill. It risks challenging Ericsson's and Nokia's business model, and with that, to weaken Europe in a core domain where Europe has strength right now. It risks also to be a threat to R&D investments, to European standardization, the open standardization system, to the patenting system in Europe. And we've heard from Florence how well we're still doing in patents right now. So it's clearly running counter the fourth objective of the digital decade, as we have it here in the list, ensuring the digital sovereignty and competitiveness, especially in the interoperable digital infrastructures. It's inconsistent with the EU strategy in the digital domain. And if we talk about sovereignty, it's whatever definition you want to apply, Paul, to this, it's really a big problem to that as well.
Thank you very much, Leo, for this point. So Damir, I'd like to hear from you. I mean, in particular, I mean, what, from your perspective, is needed for helping you grow, but also maybe to link with what Claire and Marianne were saying. How is it possible for new business model to integrate values on the question of the rights and principles that we have together? So how are we making it concrete in our business model? So Damir.
Right. Thank you very much.
Maybe the other button.
It's okay. I'm not. I can close this. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think we're privileged to contribute to the settlement here. We've been in contact for some time with what you do in the European Commission and on digital policies. I think that's we are very keen to support it from this side. So a little bit about us. It would be very beneficial if you can bring up the slides up there that we set on the Futurium. That would help also the audience online to track it, what I'm saying. I'm coming from InfoBip, and when we were presented this to the other guy in the US, and he said, you are the biggest company I've never heard about. Right. Yeah. So what do you do actually? We are coming from Croatia, and Croatia is a relatively small country, right? And 2 years ago, we reached the unicorn status, which means revenue crosses actually 1 billion euros. Last year, we finished with 1.5. So essentially, what we do actually is connected very much with the scope of Alessandro's area, I would say, because we are connecting with the mobile network operators around the globe. Actually, more precisely, 750 of them. And I think that all ETNO members are partners, or better to say, InfoBip is a partner for all ETNO members. And we are dealing actually with communication platform as a service. So we are connecting businesses and developers towards the end users or the platform. And I think that what Paul was saying was actually critical, and the sovereignty and the power is given when you have good products on the market, right? Maybe the other slides that are on the Lavinia, sorry, not this one.
Do you have
Sorry.
Because I have it's 30 slides. So which one?
Yeah, not that one. The other representation in the other group. Okay. Oh, you're fine. No problem. All right. To give you a little bit size, so we are a company actually from Croatia that has offices in 70 countries in the world, and we are operating in almost 200 countries, right? And this is a kind of part of a global connection that touches almost every part of the earth. So what is more important is that if you have ever received the message from your store operator, from your, I don't know, Nokia Adidas subscription or whatever, it's more likely that you'll come over Infobip platforms. So we touch actually around between 76 and 78% of the mobile subscriber around the globe. And you know that, and Alessandro knows, there is actually penetration more than 100% in the world of mobile subscribers, more precisely 8.3 billion. So if you look at that numbers, it gives some kind of credibility to the platform and to this area, to this network connection around the globe, right? And if you imagine any big logo on the world, and we are not allowed to present them and represent them, but just to imagine, actually all of them are coming or getting our services on some way, right? Which is a kind of exciting. All right. If I can step a little bit back and touch on these key trends, if you allow me just for a few minutes, right? And we've been spoken about artificial intelligence and large language models. So what happens actually in the last 3 to 4 weeks, and that just to pin up on the speed of innovation that you, Alex, also mentioned, right? Everybody heard about the ChatGPT, but actually in the last year and a half, there was more than 20 models that was actually put on the market, put on the eyes of the consumers, which is tremendous, right? And most of them are coming from the US, some of them coming from China, and some of them from Europe. And this gap is really big. And what happens in the recent years, since 2013, we see that AI has started in academy, right? Like some models. And then we see the industry is picking up. And picking up actually, and which creates, every report that you see on the internet needs to be looked through certain context. So if industry is picking up, and maybe to tap on Paul, what you said about the skills, if industry is picking up on this one and working in this one, academy is not, right? So when we get the fresh people from the university, right, they already have a gap. So, and then you need to make it up for that gap. And that's the reason why collaboration with academy is so important. So regionally, we are, as a company, collaborating with the 27 different academy institutions, which request actually a lot of efforts from their side and from our side, right? So I think this is extremely important. I think we are tipping on these values that we are promoting with Digital Decade. All right, that's one thing.
We have the slides and the...
Right. So I have presented this one, so we can skip this. All right, we can go on. This is the emerging technology, and ChatGPT, we mentioned, maybe if you can go to the other slide, because there is something and much more about this one. So next slide. These are the model that we were talking about in a year and a half, and why I've circled this bloom. Maybe it's not important this moment, and it's not famous like ChatGPT, but what happens actually with them is that is the outcome of thousands of researchers on the AI field, and it's open, right? So you can basically run it on your laptop and try it out. And this is amazing, actually. So, and then on the next slide, this is international, right? But I think that the major train of the model and computing power is provided by France. Eric, thank you. Because near to Paris, it was a donation, right? And this is the slide that I was talking about how industry is picking up on on the AI models, giving them out. And you can see the gap. So Bloom is here as an example, right? And if you have heard the OpenAI CEO saying the other day that, the era of large language models on AI is over, right? Because the capacity that you need actually to bring up that model is really huge, not just for the investment side, but also from the training side, from the capacity side of the human interactions and so on. So I think that might be certain true, but I don't believe that we will stop in generating new models. And why that? Because on the next slide, we will have some other stuff that are actually putting these directions, which are called generative agents. We talked about the generative AI. It was mentioned today as well. It's very important. But it's actually something called prompt engineering. When you have your ChatGPT, you have a box, you enter your native language sentence, and then it gives you some kind of feedback back, right? Your result. But generative agents are something much more revolutionary. So imagine that you have a library that talks through the APIs to this ChatGPT, and not just ChatGPT, but also the other models, and also trying to find through the APIs of Google search all the results and aggregate them to you. We tried it out. So what does it mean for digital skills again? So if you want to find a solution for your problems, like we are a programming company, right? And you have a team of engineers working for several iterations on something, right? And through the generative agents, you try to get out a piece of code. And in the same time, you want to test that code. And you give it in 15 minutes. And you put it on your production, you put it on your server, and it runs. Imagine the efficiency that you gain with these agents. And these agents are popping up every day. So this is the area of innovation actually that we can tap in. I just wanted to share it with you as an example, right? There's many of these, and there is no excuse for not innovating. Right. That's one area, very important, just to tap on what you guys said before for the AI. And I think McKinsey as well was tapping into this area. If you go next, and I'm coming from the field of communication, and from the communication is pretty much important. This is just a reflection of what we said, that the US is picking up pretty much quickly. Europe is picking up lately, especially the last year, and China is dropping down. It's not easy to come on with the LLM. It's not easy, right? And this graph shows that there is a kind of saturation, right? But they will pick up still in the future. The next area, which is important for the communication industry and also for some acts that we are giving out as a European Commission, is a Digital Market Act, right? And super apps is not a new thing, but the new thing is that everybody wants to go there. And if you have heard about the WeChat, you could know that 2/3 of Chinese are using WeChat. And actually, that's the only app they use on a daily basis. So you can do payments, you can do doctor appointments, you can do tickets, buy-in, and so on. Gaming, whatever. Social networking, messaging, whatever. It's pretty amazing, but they did it for years, actually. And then WhatsApp and Zuckerberg said, we go to that direction. Elon Musk said the other day, we go to that direction. But also there are regional players around the globe that they are already there on some extension, right? So what does it mean, actually, on the next slide? That there are some implications when it comes to Digital Market Act as well. And if they close the ecosystem as such, right, then those systems are pretty much not interoperable. So they're closing it up. That means that you kill competition, right? That you stop others to enter in, yeah? That you have to have a lot of efforts to make the system somehow works somewhere. And they are tapping up on the mobile network operators' revenues, actually, or margin, because you cannot really go in any kind of revenue share model with them, right? And on top of that, there is a disruption of classical e-commerce, which is a threat not just for mobile network operators, not just for vendors, but also for many businesses around, right? That's how we see it from our side, what happens on a daily basis interactions with this, because they are also our partners as well. So This is the second one. The third thing, it's on the next slide. Do I need to speed up? Okay. Already mentioned, you guys knows it, but this is just a little bit more details to tap on this one, right? You probably know it, but exposure of 5G. 5G is not actually the telecommunication network nodes, set of telecommunication network nodes. It's actually a pretty much new era of innovation field. And today, actually, literally, anybody can tap into 5G network with some kind of functionality, which is a virtual network function, right? It's not easy, but it's more possible than before, right? So what we say, actually, if we can utilize these network functions, capabilities of 5G network, bring it to the developers and businesses, they can innovate on top of it, right? And that is opening up. With 6G, it will more open up, of course, with more speed. Already today, we have more than 20 use cases when we could use these APIs and utilize 5G network. And that's the reason why standalone 5G will be very important, because they are providing those capabilities. Non-standalone is still having 4G for the signaling, and that's a kind of lagging out. And Europe is lagging in this one, right? This is getting standardized, but still, we have opportunity to participate. I can say that InfoBip is also part of this forum, so we are there, so that's the reason why I'm putting it there. I am sure that Nokia and Ericsson pretty much think about thoroughly on this. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is already said. You mentioned also edges, which would be extremely important to get the latencies down, to get the real-time services on the right place. Moving next slide, also mentioned it, I will finish up very soon. You mentioned, guys, with virtual words, just tapping up from the communication side. Communication side, we are not going into era of avatars, NFTs, ecosystem graphics, and so on. But when you say that you need to deliver a message in the Web 2.0 nowadays, which is SMS, which is WhatsApp, which is email, which is voice message, whatever, right? To the next world, right? If you are someone on business meeting and you are in metaverse, even though that you could have a headache, right? You want to know that your child is safe, right? So you will not actually block that message, even on a business meeting. I would do that always, right? So we will need to penetrate those messages to this place. How to bridge that? How to interlock this? Of course, this will be a new era of communication, and we know it already today. Of course, with all of this, there are some kind of challenges on the next slides, which are generalized, already mentioned challenges, but I believe that with the right regulations and with what we talked about, the needs like access to expert, like skills gaps, like speed of information, and honestly, fast fund tracking that we need to do, right? And so as in Europe, we should look in the models, how actually speed of innovation and where to invest in the real things. Yeah. And then we will be better off with that. Thank you.
Damien, thank you so much. I mean, I think that it reinforces a lot of the elements that we have in mind, and it gives a really a concrete illustration of what we should be doing. Now, maybe I see Federico and Jutta. I mean, you are both. I mean, I don't know. I mean, as you wish. I mean, Jutta. So I mean, I think it's very important to have your insight, particular on how we can really protect better rights and principles in this attempt. So Jutta. The microphone. Maybe you.
So everyone has them on their table? So, yeah, it's possible. Sorry. Maybe you can start having this ones. Yeah, maybe I start just by just by saying something without the charts. So thank you so much for having us. I'm with Identity Valley. I'm the founder of Identity Valley, a nonprofit organization that cares about digital responsibility. And we developed a framework, and I'd like to show you some insights that to better see the challenges that we are facing right now, and to see what we, from our point of a civil society organization, see that might be a possible solution and bridging some gaps. So I don't know why. So, because yeah.
Yes, I have a company. I put them on picture.
Sorry. But thanks so much for everything I learned already today, and very much liked what Marian said about the don't copy the GAFA concept. So I do also think we need a European model, and not a model that just fits for some companies, but for everyone, and especially for us as citizens and users. And there we go. So that fits exactly to our title. So if you go back to the first slide for a second, because what's here brought up from big tech to responsible tech. So we do think it's not about big tech anymore, but about responsible tech. If everyone understands that if we build responsible technologies, we don't have to think about just a few companies being the ones leading the field. So, and what we do see in the next slides is a privacy paradox. So if you look at the next slide, that's a study from 2001 saying that we all know it's difficult to use technologies because our privacy is at harm here, but we don't stop it, so we still do it. So it's really, people care about their privacy, but if a service or a digital product is just great, we just use it. So this is a paradox. And looking into today in the next chart, as Damia already said a lot about ChatGPT, so it's the same. It's there, and we're using it. Everyone wants to explore it and see what it's capable of, asking smart questions, and even companies within companies. There were some that put some secret messages in there, and so they saw we do have a problem there. If we ask a model that is using everything that it's asked to learn from this, then it's not secure. So as we know now, Italy already banned ChatGPT, and some companies told their employees not to use it because we don't know where all these informations go. And it's the impact is not thought through. So on the next slide, you can see that ChatGPT still is the one tool that has been used from 1 million users within 5 days. So it's the fastest tool to be used by users, and everyone was so curious that by within 2 months, 100 million users already explored these technologies. And then the privacy paradox comes up again in the next slide, because even people working within ChatGPT are warning us now. We haven't thought everything through, so we have to be careful. And you all know about that ask for a pause for 6 months. We also signed it knowing that we don't have to pause innovations, but we have to think about them and what impact they have for our society. And within the next part, I'd like to focus on the trust paradox. You go to the next slide. Yeah, and then the next, please. We know that, and I think Marian said it, we do have GDPR, and this is really something we should be proud of. But it's difficult to use. So it's like if you go on a website and you have to click all these things, if you really want to use it, it's hard. So it's not easy to use. And the next slide shows that if there is a chance to say, no, I don't want to be tracked, everyone is pulling that button, putting that on that button. So what Apple did in 2021, saying people, if you use that app, then you will be tracked. Is that okay, or don't you want to do this? And as you can see the statistics on the next slide, more than 50% are opting in for not being tracked. So we don't want to be tracked, but yeah, it has to be easy. It has to be understandable. We have to know what is going to be tracked. Is there something good in for me or for us or not? And on the next slide, you can see another problem with that's lying in here. If these data privacy labels that are existing right now are built by companies that are bringing up all these technologies, then it's like, as you see on the title, don't let the fox guard the hen house. It's not right. So yeah, what we think within the next slides, I'd like to show you how we think about reducing this complexity. And we are working on a framework in the next slide. So these are the digital responsibility goals that we developed together with some digital experts and also scientists and politicians and industry partners. And as you can see, kind of similar to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And as there are some digital topics missing because they came up with that framework in 2015, far too early for everything that's going on today. We developed these 7 digital responsibility goals in order to give a simple framework and orientation. And starting with digital literacy, exactly digital skills, that's it. We need to know about what's going on here. But most importantly, I think, is that we have the digital sovereignty, human agency and identity. So these are the brackets. And in between, we need to know about a new understanding, a new mindset on data fairness. It's good to have data in order to solve some problems, in order to do some research on illnesses and really help people with having more insights and having better products built on that. But we need to know, and as consumers and users and data providers, we need to know where our data is and where we can do something good with that. And of course, cybersecurity and privacy are some things that are really now being solved in Europe very well already. But on trustworthy algorithms and transparency and with the whole framework, we do think we might be able to have kind of a European revolution if we build on all these topics and not just focus on one. Exactly, cybersecurity is super important, but we need to focus on a lot of these areas, like in sustainable development. We have to understand that it's good to not use so much water, but not so much electricity, and so many more things. But we have to have a simple framework. And as you can see in the next slide, it's not just about saying it, we want to make it measurable. So we are working on the development of a digital responsibility index. And I would love to see Infobip taking a look into all these guiding criteria that we just developed. So we do have 2 big research projects. We are a very young organization, to have to say that, but we have 2 big projects, one in Germany around the Gaia-X ecosystem, and within the health sector, and the other one on the European level on the food sector, in order to implement these digital responsibility goals and build policies out of this to know how can we make all these sectors more responsible. And yes, just another slide. So we think complexity is rising like hell, and we really need to change course now. We really are at a tipping point. So if everything we saw what happened with generative AI, seeing the Pope or Trump and Obama and Merkel at the beach. So these pictures, it's we know now, okay, these are fake pictures, but we will not be able to understand what is fake, what is not fake, if we don't know whom we can trust. So we need to know who is the source of an information, and are these companies, are these governments, are these people in the ecosystem trustworthy, and are they acting responsibly? So we do think we have to focus on this. And yeah, so the next slide, we really think it's about thinking having a new thinking. So what should technology do and not what can technology do? Because we know it can do a lot, but going the European way, I think I'm very happy everything I heard today. That gives me a lot of hope that we can make it. So yeah, and within the next slide, you can see whom you can contact, Ferdinand, our Director Policy and Research, and me, and I'm very happy to discuss these topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jutta. I mean, I think it was extraordinary to understand how so thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. I look forward for development in the future and linking with the business ecosystem to making it happening. Now, Federico, I mean, another key player of the European innovation digital ecosystem. Federico, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I also have a couple of slides. I don't know if you can bring them up, but let me first introduce myself. So I'm the CEO of EIT Digital, who is one of the 9 knowledge and innovation communities of the EIT. And you understand from the name that we are the one dealing with digital technologies. We are also part of the first wave of knowledge and innovation communities. That means that we just we are turning 13 this year, while our younger sister has been born last year, the Culture and Creativity KIC. So we have a bit of history behind. If you look at our mission and vision, what we say is that we want to achieve a strong digital Europe, which is fair, inclusive, and sustainable, which goes along with what has been said before. So it's not only about the technology, it's not only about making profit with the technology, but it's also about implementing technology that is for the people and respects human values. You can maybe skip a few slides. I will not go in detail here. You can go right away to slide 11, actually 12, where I put some notes on what I want to say for this part of the session. One more. Yet another. Yeah, the next one is the right one. So we believe that there are 3 priorities when we look at this decade in terms of digital transformation and to realize a strong digital Europe. The first one, it has been said multiple times this morning, is about the strategic sovereignty. The definition indeed can be different between different people, but what we really believe is that Europe needs first to map what are the technologies that we need, what are the industry that we want to own or at least access, and that are strategic for the development of our economy and society. And then based on that, we need to develop a long-term plan that makes this happen. This is not something we do from one day to the other. And I think the study from McKinsey is great because it already does this analysis. Then when you want to achieve strategic sovereignty, you can either own the key industry or you can co-own by sharing with other governments, or you can access it. Access is, of course, the least preferable option because access can be also terminated unilaterally by the other part. So ideally, if Europe would like to become achieve digital sovereignty, should own the key industries or at least co-own them. At the moment, this is not happening in most of technology sectors, as it was also said before, and this needs definitely to change. And also we need to ensure that where we are a top player and where we own those industries, that we don't lose them, because that also happened in the past, that gradually we lost track compared to other parts of the world. And to achieve strategic sovereignty, we also need instruments that are supporting the creation of European unicorns, it was said before. And I think Europe made significant progress. The EIT that I represent, but also the EIC, the Digital Europe program by DG Connect, these are all great examples. What I'm missing, and I think that will be the next step, is to have a better orchestration between and synergies between these 3 instruments, because they can really multiply themselves and reinforce themselves. Now I still see them a bit working in silos. And we as EIT Digital are working with all of them, but also for us, sometimes it's not so easy to develop strategic partnerships. So that's about the first part. If you move to the next slide. The second one is about the so-called citizen digital social contract. You know, the social contract is the basis of many of all the modern democracies, but we don't have a digital social contract. And given the development of society and economy, we believe this would be important. And you see some examples on my slide of cases where a bad, and that was not triggered by bad intention all the time. It was sometimes a lack of knowledge or understanding of technology that was hurting human rights in very developed European countries. We have an example in Belgium when at the airport they were tracking people movement, which was not correct. And this is not always, well, it's never good, but sometimes it's not coming with bad intention. It's just a lack of understanding of the consequences of applying digital technologies. So if you go to the next slide, what I said before, we have the social contract, which defines the foundation of liberal democracies and the relationship between governments and citizens. We need the digital version, and if you go to the next slide, there are some key elements. We need to ensure compliance with standards and certification, prevention of misuse, and especially we need a democratic supervision of technology. And this is aligned with the digital rights and principle of the European Commission. So this should become a top priority. And that's the second element after the sovereignty. And then third is about, and that's the next slide, actually a couple of slides, is about skills. This was also said before. You can also go to the next one. We need digital skilled EU citizens, and we analyzed the landscape in one of our reports, and this is just the conclusion. If you want to read more, I uploaded also the full report this morning on the Futurion platform. First of all, the public education system needs to be modernized urgently. The programs on digital education are pretty old, and this needs to be done both for the university in order to achieve the number of specialists that we need, but also to start early on to teach, to explain or teach digital technologies in schools, including at primary and secondary school. Then the second point is that there is a lot of fragmentation. So there is a lot happening in the public domain. There are also private initiatives, but very often these are not developed thinking of the bigger picture. These are individual initiatives, and sometimes they don't complement each other. And here we believe that also the private sector should play a role. You see what Google is doing in the US. They're really investing a lot on education. I don't see always European companies doing the same. And last but not least, and this is aligned with what I said before also about the innovation ecosystem and scaling of companies, we need a better orchestrated better orchestration of the different pan-European initiatives. We have the EIT, which is doing a lot with the universities, but we have also a lot of university networks that are working on modernizing university education in Europe with a digital focus, but this is not always done in synergy, and this needs to change. And this cannot come only by the European Commission. This also needs to come by the member states. So these are the three priorities. If you go to the next slide, you have them summarized one after the other. Yeah, this one you can skip. You can read more in our report. So the next one should be the one with the conclusions. So European strategic digital sovereignty, a social contract on digital with citizens, and of course, skills.
Thank you very much, Federico. It's very important for us to have you on board of this digital decade ship, and all the very clear priorities and substantiated elements that you have provided are extremely useful. Now we need to move on with this session, but I would like to have two quick interventions with Claire and Leo, and then we will do a short break before starting the third session. Claire.
Thank you. Quick reactions indeed on societal challenges, because you're invited for societal challenges. And again, that's the heart of what we do, right? Centering people's needs and rights. just a reaction as well on what both last speakers were talking about. We can't really trust technologists and the technology industry to really rely on trust and be the bearer of values, or be the social contract in democracies. We actually need legislation, and that's the role of the legislator and in a democratic society to be forming the regulation that will guide our action for the future. So we really are pushing for hard legislation, not just principles and contract and soft legislations that also really could even go undermining hard legislation in the EU. I wanted to zoom in on two challenges. One is inclusion, digital inclusion. We know that the digitalization of most public services would lead to further social exclusion and could result in people losing their rights or autonomy. There were some reports that I'm happy to share, including a report from the Haut Conseil du Travail Social in France, which shows that 1 in 5 people in France face difficulties in accessing social services online, and that would endanger also the principles of equality in access to public services. So we would also like to see the push for digitalization to go with ensuring access to people's rights and the rights to also remain analog in accessing services. And another concern, and that was briefly touched upon in the slide, and it was very small, but those harms that were mentioned are actually very real and very concrete harms already of AI happening in Europe, where there are algorithms used to predict criminality in certain neighborhoods. There are algorithms used to detect fraud to social benefits, and the Dutch scandal in access to child benefits is just one example, but there are others. Emotional recognition, control and use of AI against people on the move. Those are really real examples that are happening right now. So as part of a regulation, the AI Act that is being currently discussed, we would like to see really clear limits. Now is the moment to regulate those most harmful uses, to empower people who are on the beneficiary and at the targets of this system, making sure that there is transparency, the right to complaints, effective remedy if you've been the victim or if you've been targeted by automated decision-making. Making sure that the institutions using AI systems, so not just the developers once again, but the institutions using them are accountable for using the system, and use human rights impact assessment or other forms of accountability system to making sure that they won't harm, and prohibit the most harmful uses of AI systems, including remote biometric identification, which was mentioned before, predictive policing, emotional recognition, biometric categorization, and use of AI against people on the move.
Thank you. Text of the current negotiation of the AI Act, and very important for us to take into account. So, but just to close, because we need to move on with a short coffee break of 5 minutes. Leo.
Yes, regarding strategy areas, I would just like to add spectrum, because the mobile growth and increasing data traffic will require additional spectrum, and there is a need to update the radio spectrum policy paper of the Commission, which goes only until 25, and to adopt a strategy for 6G to identify further bands, and there needs to be a clear European positioning in the World Radio Conference 23. Regarding security, I mean, Paul has said already a lot. I just would like to mention that there has been so many initiatives that need some consolidation anyway. So there's NIS2, CRA, CSA, sector-specific regulation, and then there have been some exercises like the member states doing joint risk assessments regarding 5G. This could be expanded to other critical networks. One point on skills I would like to add is really the need for STEM education. So there's a large challenges skills mismatch, and a lot has been already said about general digital education. The Commission has come up with a new proposal just, I think, 2 days ago, where they propose improvements, training of the teachers, new academy certificates. But what we really see is really the need for more engineers, more data scientists, more IT security experts. So the symptoms start in the kindergarten, and what this is kind of calling for is it would be an EU initiative together with kindergartens, primary schools on STEMs.
Thank you very much, Leo. So I suggest now that we are running late, so that we are going a very short coffee break, 5 minutes, and then we come back for discussing a critical dimension of sustainable development and greening. Thank you very much.
Worked very closely with is the economic dimension of sustainability. We have worked for several years on the social dimension of sustainability, but this is the first time we work on the environmental dimension of sustainability. And because it's the first time, it's exciting and it's nice and it's great, but at the same time, it's very complex because we have just infancy steps that we're taking now. What I would like to say before I pass the word to Luis is that we cannot, and what we see, we cannot stay measuring only the negative impacts of digitalization. Green digital transition is about their nexus, it's about their synergies, not only about their conflicts. But the fascination by the media, by the experts out there about the conflict is great, because that's the only measurable thing at the moment. Because it's easy to measure the electricity consumption of data centers. It's easy to measure the tons of e-waste of our devices, consumer and industrial. So we should not fall in the trap let's look for the keys where the light is, because that's what we measure. This is the only thing we do. So I would like to encourage us to think a little bit out of the box and to start to think, how do we measure the real impact, what we call the net impact, the positives minus the negatives. And this is what we would like to discuss, and we have some suggestions. And there is no better person than Luis Neves, who is the CEO of GESI. GESI is in this work for almost 20 years. They have made many reports. They're working on something called Digital with Purpose. And Jesse is also heading the secretariat of the Green Digital Coalition that we established as DG Connect. Well, our commissioner has kicked it off, Commissioner Breton. And the coalition works on this concept of net impact. We start very small with very specific use cases of digital and innovations like buildings, energy networks, agriculture, precision farming. We take very specific use case and we calculate the net impact, the positive minus the negative. But we need scaling up this type of efforts. In order to measure something on European scale, we need member states to understand it and to scale it. So Luis will take us a little bit through the experience that Jesse has acquired and what he has already measured, what is he as a real life experience. And then we have the discussion afterwards. So Luis.
Thank you so much, Elias, and good morning. Let me first of all thank you for the invitation. Also, I would like to apologize for not being here from the very beginning, but I just came from a 10-day trip to China, where I was deeply involved in technology development. So I visited many different companies and organizations to try to understand where digital is taking us. And I'm really thrilled for what's coming towards us. I will let you know a little bit during my presentation. So Elias asked me 2 questions around what are the efforts needed to ensure successful, sustainable and digital transformation, and also about the opportunities of twinning the 2 transitions, green and digital. And I think to reply to both of these 2 questions, I need to elaborate a little bit and maybe even repeating some things that probably you have already touched upon when I was not here. But I did some reflection around these 2 questions, and I looked back to what was digital 15 years ago and what is digital today. And I'll come to it around the end of my intervention. Well, let me start by saying something which I think is maybe a commonplace. Digital technology enriches life and work. We today talk about smart living, smart vehicles, smart ports, smart cities, smart coal mines, smart devices, smart manufacturing, cloud computing, and everything that is supporting these underlying new developments go from traditional technologies like normal phone calls to the internet, instant messaging, e-banking, online shopping, broadband communication, smart devices, cloud, AI, and so on and so on. So digital innovations are taking our society into a future of unlimited potential, embracing new areas such as health and wellness, autonomous and intelligence, robots, sustainable development, where we talk very much about energy efficiency, but sustainable development is much more than that. And I'll come to it also later on. And we also need to take into consideration that we are moving into what I would call an hybrid digital world. So everyday life and learning, digital twins. So digital technologies allow us to sense and control the body, to communicate, work, drive, and play, building a hybrid digital world. So I was inside a new electric vehicle, which is a new innovation. And when it comes to technology, everything is different from what we see today in a Tesla car. So today we have in the Tesla car the screen, and in the future we have everything in front of us, and inside the car you don't see anything. So it's all virtual outside. You can control your environment totally. And this is where technology is taking us, and these new developments that we are seeing are taking us. So digital technologies are taking us further, transcending biological limits, allowing to better understand nature of ourselves. They are expanding our perception of the world, as well perception itself, and they are going near and beyond human perception, from sensory substitution to sensory enhancement, and from human to machine perception. So digital innovation is pushing back the frontiers of knowledge in areas such as physics, chemistry, biology. And it's clear that these developments require more capacity. So what we have been seeing is that global mobile broadband traffic is arriving to much more than 100 times growth every 10 years. And this capacity increase is derived from new developments in technology, from copper to fiber, optical fiber, and so on. So the definition of digital today is very different from the past. In 2008, when Jesse did the very first SMART report, SMART 2020, where we asked McKinsey to look into the footprint, the global footprint of digital, the enabling impact of digital technologies, and the business value of derived from those efficiencies, we defined ICT as PCs, telecom networks, and devices, printers, and data centers. This was the definition of ICT. We're talking only 15 years back. So if we think today, we are talking about digital access, cloud, cognitive, blockchain, fast internet, IoT, digital reality, and more. So when we talk about ICT and digital today, we can no longer think about the old traditional way that we have been talking about, but we need to think totally differently. And to determine a sustainable strategy connected with digital and to define clear objectives requires a clear definition of the scope of the industry. It can no longer stay within traditional understanding. So technology is now used to connect and communicate, opening up relationships, information, ideas, and opportunities. It's used to monitor and track the world around us so that our impact is transparent and we can make targeted interventions. It allows us to analyze vast swaths of information, optimize processes, procedures, and resource productivity, predict where we need to intervene, and augment our human abilities and automate systems to carry out activities on our behalf by creating an active bridge between the physical and digital worlds. So the opportunities of twinning the two transitions, green and digital, from our perspective are enormous. And we can see that, and we have evidence in Jesse that prove what I'm saying. So in our first report, the SMART 2020 that I already mentioned, the conclusion was that the footprint of the industry, the global footprint was 2% of the global emissions, so 1.4 gigatons of CO2, and the enabling impact was 5 times greater, so around 7 gigatons of CO2, and the business value was $1 trillion US. We did the same report with the Boston Consulting Group in 2012 and with the Accenture strategy in 2015. And what we saw is that as we are deploying more technologies, the enabling impact was increasing substantially. So in our 2015 report, the global footprint of the industry actually decreased from 1.4 to 1.25 gigatons of CO2. The reason for that is that our industry is becoming much, much more efficient. So if you think about a mobile antenna in the past, you used to see lots of copper cables inside connecting different parts of the antenna. Today, it's a kind of plug-in process where you have, the connections at the bottom and at the top, and everything is digitalized in the antenna. So the efficiencies generated by technology are enormous inside our own industry. So I was not surprised. Many people is surprised and is still discussing this, but I was not surprised that in fact our global emissions are going down. But the enabling capacity of digital increased from the factor 1 to 5 to 1 to 10. So in our 2015 report, the conclusion was that digital technologies can reduce 20% of the global emissions, which in fact could bring emissions in 2030 at the level of 2015. And the business value, by the way, it was equivalent to the GDP of China. And so our conclusion in Jesse was, the more we deploy digital, the better for the environment. Many people is talking about the problem. We love to talk about the solution. And by the way, there is no other industry in the world which can evidence more efficiencies in its operation than the digital industry. So talking about the problem is a waste of time. We need really to focus on the solution side and see how can we speed up the solution. And if we do not do it in Europe, we will be overtaken as we are already by China in the United States. And it will go further on. So in our digital repurpose report, we went further analyzing 7 disruptive technologies in connection to sustainable development. So we looked to the 17 sustainable development goals, 169 targets, and we did the causation analysis between 7 disruptive technologies. So I'm talking about IoT, virtual reality, blockchain, 5G, and so on. And what we saw was that the positive impact of digital technologies based on 500 case studies that we analyzed was that digital technologies can impact 45% in a positive manner the sustainable development goals. And we calculated again the business value, which was huge, and we calculated again the positives and the negative impacts. And when it comes to negative impacts, we identify 5 areas that the companies need to take care of. Is of course energy consumption, but energy consumption is something that everybody needs to take care of. This is not particular to the ICT industry. Every single industry needs to be more efficient. It's circular economy, privacy and security that is becoming more and more problematic in our industry, as you know, supply chain impacts, and digital inclusion. And digital inclusion, why? Because we need to invest more in deploying connectivity. We need more people connected. We need people to have access to the internet. We still have over 2 billion people without access. So it's important that we give access to people. Later on, we did a report that we call the Digital Access Index, and this is a huge database covering 156 countries around the world, looking at different technologies and indicators covering categories such as connectivity, that means infrastructure, use, affordability, technologies like cellular, M2M connections and social media penetrations, and also digital solutions and use cases. This study and this report and this database shows that the countries which have deployed more technology are the most developed countries in the world and the more sustainable countries in the world. And this is a database where we have evidence, we have data. Actually, this is from 2019. I'm convinced that if we would update that database with new evidence, new data, the results would be even bigger. So to conclude, I think that the sustainable or a successful sustainable digital transformation requires digital to be a purpose-driven industry. And this can be achieved in two ways. On one side, the digital industry needs to take responsibility for its own impacts and invest, innovate, and deploy responsibly new technologies. But for both to be successful, we need to measure progress year over year. And this is why in Jesse, we developed what we call today the Digital with Purpose framework. We put in place a set of metrics to measure company performance, to understand whether a company is sustainable or not. We have metrics on climate change, sustainable supply chain, privacy and security, digital inclusion, circular economy, but we also have metrics on the enabling impact of deploying digital technologies. So we want to award companies that invest on new innovations, and the combination of those are the ones that give the dimension of a sustainable company. And so we have deployed this framework, is already in place. We have 45 companies that decided to be part of this. We are next week issuing the first report that shows, and what we saw is that in the first phase, that the perception of companies in terms of their sustainability level is very different from the reality. So when we look at the companies and audit the information that they provide, we see that sometimes they live in a different world, different from the reality. And this is a very good learning, because this will be more responsibility to the industry as well. So let me conclude by saying that everything that we imagine today is too little for tomorrow. So we need really to think that everything is changing very fast if we want to put in place an appropriate sustainable strategy, and if we want really to keep the world on track and the boundaries of the planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you. So it was like a déjà vu through 20 years of work. I just wanted to introduce a couple of people that actually work with us on this, and that's Leo Baumann from Nokia, Alessandro, that already spoke, from Etno. We have also in the European Green Digital Coalition, Dassault System, that was Florence this morning. Digital SME Alliance, we have GSMA. We have also very expertise through Carbon Trust, but we do collaborate, and we already discussed with World Economic Forum and others. So I'm opening the floor. I know there are also people online that may want to talk, so maybe they can send a message if they would like to speak, like Sebastian, for example, from WEF. But let's take so we have one, so Leo 2, and maybe Sebastian 3. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a pity that BEUC is not one of the partners that you mentioned. So we hope to change that because we've also worked on sustainability and find it very important. But in fact, I would like to start from our perspective. We see dangers in trying to link the digital and green transition. And we would urge caution of trying to call them like the twin transitions. And I'm going to explain why. The green transition is a goal and a condition to make sure we live in a healthy planet. Digitalization is a means for that and other purposes. And this is not mere semantics. In fact, we see risks of linking both transitions. First, we witness the so-called rebound effect, where convenience and efficiencies of digitalization, in fact, are offset by more intense use by consumers, which leads to more challenges to sustainability. The second risk is that digitalization of everyday products and household appliances actually significantly reduce the lifespan and are at odds with sustainability goals. For example, you probably saw a change of how long your TV lasts as compared to smart TVs nowadays. And that is at odds with sustainability goals. And that's why the latest generation of eco-design measures are trying to address this, and it's important not to lose focus on this. Another issue where digitalization actually threatens our move to more sustainable and durable consumption is the issue of part pairing. So we see a lot of electronic appliances like smartphones that pair some parts of their product with software that is embedded and make it impossible for independent repairers to actually use non-original equipment manufacturers' spare parts. And that is, again, at odds with sustainability goals. And finally, this digitalization can also lead to dystopian scenarios. An independent MIT study recently showed that a mass adoption of self-driving cars would generate as many CO emissions as the world's 16 data centers currently do, and this is very concerning. Also, Transparent Environment report showed that alerting that the uptake of self-driving cars could increase congestion in cities, but also sustainability concerns, because we can, for example, imagine self-driving cars being empty, waiting for their owners to arrive. And that is, again, at odds with sustainability goals. And that's why we think that it's not good to link both transitions, but see the green transition as a goal and digitalization as a means, of course, that can be useful, but the use of digital technologies to be targeted. For example, we see the benefits of it in the energy sector. We don't expect, we expect actually electricity production to become more intermittent. For example, that means that, consumers cannot control when the wind will be blowing, when the sun will be shining to maximize energy production. And therefore, technology here can be of use and reach these sustainability goals. But we should not make generalizations, and that's the main message I wanted to give today. And for that, we need proper and right regulations. For example, one issue that we see is the limitations for access to data by some data holders. So here, regulation can be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. I will come back to that. All those issues that you We will briefly highlight answers to some of the questions you raised. They're all real and present and very, very clear. So I will do that after the first set of intervention, or somebody else can do that as well. So Leo.
Thank you, Elias. And thank you, Luis, for outlining already the situation very well with your two leitmotifs, that we need to invest into solutions and we need to deploy solutions. But I agree also with you, Marianne, that it's good to link the two only if ICT provides solutions for the goals of greening society and the economy. So what efforts are we doing as a connectivity provider? We are investing into constantly achieving more efficient solutions. So, and we do that mostly through chips innovation. So designing always more performant chips, so the performance is going up while the power consumption is going down. We do that in all domains. I mean, we have Quillion in fiber installations, we have Nokia Reef Shark in mobile baseband, and we have FP5 in IP routing, and all three consume about 50 to 75% less energy than their predecessors. We also invest into AI solutions, which make the networks more performant and more efficient. When it comes to the deployment of solutions, one point is very clear. The energy transition towards renewables is not possible without connectivity and without connecting all the assets of the energy, of the power production and transmission system. That's very clear. Another good example is the water distribution system, where digitalization completely transforms water utilities, makes automation possible, sensing and controls, so that you detect water leaks instantly and not in a couple of weeks or months. And those problems are really serious. I mean, in a country such as Germany, you lose about 22 to 25% of water due to water leaks. And it's incredibly energy consuming to produce drinking water. And this can be solved simply by providing digital solutions to them. But it goes far beyond. I mean, it goes into all sectors, into logistics, transports, mining. An example a good example is also manufacturing. We have provided mobile connectivity to our lighthouse factory in Oulu, which is has been recognized as a lighthouse factory of the future by McKinsey and the World Economic Forum, because we have deployed everything that is possible in terms of, you know, digitalization, digital twins, you name it. And actually the result is not only a productivity increase of 30%, but also a reduction by 54% of the energy needed per unit produced. So incredible what you can achieve by linking the two, where the ICT as a means really provides results in the goals. And Ilias mentioned that we are a participant in the European Green Digital Coalition, so we have submitted quite a number of case studies which document and prove the effects. Some have been selected, not all, because sometimes the data is missing, or we can prove it, but we don't have the detailed data. But there as well, it's I think a very useful website to look at examples of those solutions. And the coalition is about to develop a methodology to prove really the beneficial effect. So the positive effects minus all the negativities that you have, of course, that are necessary to produce the digital solutions.
Thank you, Leo. I don't know if Sebastian is actually online, ready to make a point. Yes?
I am online. Can you hear and see me?
I see you, but you need to raise your mic voice.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I can try to raise my voice a little bit. Thank you for bringing me in, and it was also great to hear that World Economic Forum figures have been cited already at a few times from where the role of digital in driving growth in the next couple of years. And I think earlier we heard that digital really has a role to play in the reduction of carbon emissions. I think the figure of 20% was mentioned until 2050, which actually focuses on hard to abate sectors like energy, materials, buildings, and more. Much of our research shows indeed that technologies all the way from digital twins that have been mentioned to blockchain have really a role to play in accelerating the deployment and market readiness of high impact climate technologies that cuts across things like green hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuels, things like carbon capture, which I would say fall at the sort of the less problematic spectrum of geoengineering. I think one additional point that would be worth just adding and throwing into the discussion is really recognizing that we should be looking both at existing technologies and scaling up existing technologies when it comes to decarbonization, but then also looking at some of the more recent technology trends that were mentioned earlier and the role that they can play. Some of our recent work focuses, for instance, on the role of predictive algorithms and artificial intelligence in climate change adaptation. For instance, the use of predictive algorithms to predict wildfires before they emerge. I think we heard about somewhat problematic cases like predictive policing earlier. I think when it comes to predicting environmental potential natural disasters, there are probably less controversial solutions that could actually have a big impact. And the role of AI and generative AI, as you have also heard, is quite significant in this space. And of course, there are also areas that will require a lot of also attention from regulators when it comes, for instance, to the use of AI to make crops more resistant to climate change, make them less water use heavy, so to say. These could be potentially hugely impactful intersections of the green and the digital agenda. But of course, where there's light, there's also shadow, and we also need to look at the risks of all of that. So I think there is big room to look at the intersection of the earlier technology trends and the digital agenda and see to what extent will this move and push the boundaries of this agenda in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Sebastian. Allow me to, you already witnessed something that is happening at large in the society. The society today is polarized between the solutionists and the pollutionists. So we have very clear narratives of how AI, quantum, 5G will solve all the problems. And there are examples, and Leo mentioned, there are many examples. We have in the Green Digital Coalition collected almost 100 examples where technology does actually have positive impact. And then you have more of a kind of environmental or even, consumer and social experts focusing on the negatives. And they are very much right. I mean, there is a lot of rebound effects. And we would need to bring it together and to actually look at the reality. We need to square it and talk about net effects. The way I see it is like, imagine a cylinder. The cylinder is the green digital kind of a impact of digitalization environment, let's put it that way. There are people that shed the light on the square, so they only see the projection being a circle, negative things. Others that look at it from along the side and show the light on the cylinder from the side, they see only square. And at the moment, we have two societies, one seeing only circles, the other seeing only squares. We need to bring it down to evidence. And they both talk about one partial view of the reality. It's one angle of the reality. It's not the reality. So just to come back to what Marianne said, it's very clear that there is rebound effect. Take it from very basic, what rebound effect means, I will just explain. When cars created engines that are under 10 liters per 100 kilometers, remember when we first started, there were cars that were spending like 15 liters per 100 kilometers. We are now down to 6. So we would expect that we consume 1/3 of the gas or benzene or whatever you call it, in the world, but we actually spend more. So we do more with cars. It's the same with digital. The 3G compared to 5G, it's like many, many times more energy efficient. The chips that we're producing today are more slow in terms of energy efficiency, but we spend more electricity and more data. So the rebound effects are there. Maybe there are good reasons, maybe there are not good reasons. There are good examples where we deploy connected mobility that actually leads to a negative impact, as you just explained. So everything is in what I would call governance. And IPCC said that very clearly. Digital is a powerful tool for climate change if governed properly. And that governed properly is the key that we need to embed in this digital decade as a basis for member states to guide us and for the companies to be guided by the digital with purpose. So digital with purpose and what we do in the coalition is mainly talking about companies and private sector. We need to take out the lessons for the governance on the government, and that means national, international, national, and local governance. That governance is not obvious. It's really foggy. What is the governance? Because immediate reaction of people is, oh, don't touch any governance hampers innovation. Just stop it. Just leave the digital to be free to do what they want. So governance is immediate allergic reaction to governance. The reaction to that is, no, it will hamper innovation. What we need to show and what we need to come up with a framework that actually strengthens and boosts innovation. Because if you say, I give you 2 lines, no harm to environment and human rights, those are 2 boundaries, innovate within that, I'm sure you will boost innovation. And it's not obvious how do you actually put those lines with respect to digital innovation? Because, you know, human rights, I mean, we all talk about it, but nobody respects them. How do we actually make something real out of this? And that's part of digital decade. No harm to environment. I mean, that's for DigiClimate, DigiEnvironment, that's a red line. Once they see and measure that we're actually crossing these lines, they will come back with legislative measures against any type of digitalization. So we need to create in our own house very clear governance rules. What does it mean that we have a net impact? Yes, we will grow the digital footprint. That's fine. We will grow it. Maybe from 2% or 3% it's today. Let's go maybe to 4%. But we need to prove that we have multiple impact on saving emissions. So with 1% increase, do I decrease 20 total? Yes, then it's okay. But if we only say we want to increase from 3 to 4, we will be forbidden if we don't show that we have a positive impact. That is the big question in the digital decade, that we need to put it right. It will take years, but we need to set it right for the governments to understand this narrative and to measure. How do they measure? By having a precise methodological network standard. We are about there, but the understanding of it is very little. So I would like you to now to invite you to start thinking and help us creating this governance network, okay? And it's true for chips, because chips have big environmental impact, but they have to show what is their net positive. It's true for telecoms, and Alessandro knows exactly what is happening. And it's more than anything true about the e-waste. For me, the biggest problem with digital is the material consumption. It's the material inefficiency. It's not the energy. And in e-waste, we need to really materialize what we just came up as a commission with right to repair. We need to really boost the built-in obsolescence fight, and we work with eco-design people. So you will see in May the first eco-design criteria for mobile phones and tablets. They are ready, but they are just postponed until they are announced as a package with other things. So all this is happening, but the implementation enforcement is the key.
So thank you. I think you mentioned the chips indeed. So as I mentioned at the start, the climate consortium is very important. And so when we talk digitization, it means, as Louis also mentioned, connected devices. So digitization will lead to a tremendous amount of data generated, from machine, and we'll also need, if we have 30 billion devices connected today, we expect something like 100 billion, in 2027, 2030. So this is tremendous amount of data which will need to be processed, whether it's data centers, whether it's, with the mobile phones and so on. And that in turn, of course, flags, the sustainability aspect, that it needs to be taken into account in terms of energy, but also in terms of impact on the climate. And with that one, I would just like to add that, from a SEMI point of view, we lead a global initiative on semiconductor climate change. This is 80 corporates, 80 companies worldwide across the entire value chain. And in fact, also McKinsey is one of our advisors on this committee. So we drive that in terms of really making sure that this is not only economical impact, but societal impact is very important that in addressing it when we discuss sustainability. And also, we were talking about European strength. So the semiconductor, not only from manufacturing, as I mentioned at the start, that is really addressing sustainability across every aspect of the manufacturing process, from equipment, from material, but also the transitioning of the industry from chip-level design to system-level integration. Again, with the key driver is high performance, low power consumption. This is again for the data centers, for all the future need that's going to process the data. And again, and one additional point is Europe's leadership is also in providing technology solutions that can allow, for the chip level and also the system level to be high performance and low power consumption, with an example like FD-SOI, the fully depleted SOI technology. This is now playing a strategic role, in enabling high performance, low power consumption, moving forward. And at chip level, for automotive, for data centers, for mobile phones, all that uses the data, analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Leitman. Can I ask you one thing? Because our statistics showed 50 billion by 2025 devices. You're talking already 100 billion by 27. Now imagine this. We will put 100 billion things, and those are maybe few grams, but it's material. Those devices will be put in the walls, in the cars, in the fields, in the factories, everywhere. Suppose we change the standard. We go to 6G, and standard changes. And those devices are not online updatable. What will happen? We just let them rot, and those are thousands of tons of materials, and we deploy another 100 billion because we need to change the standard. So how do we ensure that there is updatability and durability, this kind of eco-design principle in the IoT itself? Because 100 billion things is not negligible to just throw away and put another 100 in. How do we do that?
It's a very good question, and I think this is one of the challenges that need to be put on the table to address, to enable this, the adaptation of the 6G. This is definitely not a solution that is already available today to plug and play, but this is, I think, what we mentioned is a topic that needs to be addressed. How do you, what is the problem statement, and how do we get there as part of the deployment? The transitioning. It's a fact. You will need that. You will need the new standards for the for the 5G, for the 6G, which are not available today. This is part of this, working on the, defining the solution.
And sorry, Luis, that's why the problem comes down to sustainability by design. So when we do IoT deployments, do we have the standards that are future-proof, that would also take into account other things so we don't waste? The material waste is the biggest problem in IT at the moment as well, in addition to social issues.
Let me tell one thing. You're talking about standards. So I was 2 weeks ago at the first ETSI, which is the European Standardization Body, Sustainability Summit. I was, for 2 weeks ago, at the first ETSI Sustainability Summit. So anyone is thinking about sustainability in the standards environment? No one. People design the standards as you go. They are not looking whether the standard is bringing more sustainability or not. Another thing I would like to state, we have been talking about rebound. In our digital repurpose report, we put a 50% rebound in our calculations. 50, which is a huge number, even though the enabling impact of digital was around the 20% of the emission reductions. Another question, is there any industry that does not have a rebound effect? Do you know any? I don't. But do you know any industry that has the capacity of generating efficiencies in all different sectors as we have as a digital industry? There is no one. So when you apply digital to smart cities, to mining, to whatever you can think of, you are getting rid of many materials as well. Who is accounting for those materials and resources that we are no longer in need? Is there anyone looking at that? So we're talking, so digital is now the star, and it's good because digital is the only industry that can really keep track on climate change. If you think otherwise, you are wrong. Maybe I'm very, very strong here, but I started to work for telecommunications in 2007. No, in 2000. No, it was already in 1971. So 53 years ago. The first submarine cable launched in Portugal, where I was working, has capacity to carry 200 conversations. The same cable is still there with a limited capacity. Why? Because we have compressed everything. In the transmission room of the submarine cable station, I don't know how many square meters, Ed. Today is everything in a corner of that room. So there, we can spend hours and days discussing this. And I know, and it's real, that digital, as any other industry, we have negative impacts. But we need to address the negatives. So we need to take responsibility for that as companies. And that's why I think that we're making also a huge mistake when we look at sustainable products. Because we are looking on the small thing. We need to look at sustainable companies. Is it the company sustainable or not? Does the company include sustainability in all its operations or not? Do we measure that or not? Do we account for that or not? And by the way, I see many companies making pledges, thousands. Look at that, Amazon pledge, the World Economic Forum pledge, the IETU pledge. But who's measuring? Who has the indicators to understand whether the company is becoming sustainable or not? So that's where we need to go, and that's where I think DGDC can make a difference, because we are really developing the methodology to measure, to calculate. It will be not perfect because it's impossible to consider all the dimensions of what we're looking at. We also do not have enough data to measure, but it's a fundamental step to help. And one last comment, Europe is part of the world. Europe is not alone. So we need to understand that while it's very important that we need to strive for a sustainable Europe, we also need to think that we are in a world global environment where the other blocks are developing innovations, new technologies, pushing and pushing and pushing, and we cannot stay behind. So we need to balance things in our analysis and also policy making.
I will pass the word to Claire, but before that, all you said is right, and I know your work, that's fine. But we in Digital Decade, we want to pass beyond potentials, beyond kind of statements that digital is important, that we see everywhere. We need to go down to metrics and to mobilize member states to implement those metrics and to realize that potential. So this is the hardest part in this setting. So we want to actually use your experience to come up with a framework and metrics that make sense to member states. At the same time, and I know that companies, the private sector is actually ahead compared to member states in green digital thinking. And I still agree with what Marianne, what she said, digital is there to serve the three dimensions of sustainability to the green transition. It's not the same issue, okay? I very much agree. That's why the twin transition is kind of a unfortunate word, but we understand and we very much agree with that. Okay, Claire.
Likewise, plus one to Marianne's comment about like the twinning, which really makes as an assumption that digital will be a solution to the climate crisis. And also, again, that these conversations are happening in isolation with from civil society, including climate justice organizations and other civil society organizations. So you're talking about stakeholders, but it's not clear to us how civil society and especially those working on environment and climate are included. And just a point on not just looking on the net gain and how much the digitalization can contribute, but also how much it produces and like doing a net gain. But like also if we agree that digital is not the solution, there are solutions put forward by the IPCC that involve frameworks of sufficiency and looking into our overall consumption and way of life, which we would like to see present as overall. What are the other solutions? What are the other pillars? And it's not just about the e-waste. There are also growing evidence of the extractive nature of the digital industry, both in terms of their business model and data extractivism, but also, of course, about the material that are needed. I think somebody pointed in the chat as well, and especially from the global south, countries that are the most affected by climate crisis, or even other peripheries of Europe where we need these extractions of material for technologies to work.
Yes, very much agree. This sufficiency has been, I mean, I can point you to a report because we don't have time much, but I worked for 2 years with about 15 researchers and experts. There is, if you just Google it out, Digital Reset report that takes into account what you just said. And very much agree also because I work in international cooperation with the Global South, and they see all these narratives. When they hear what we just talking about here, they see it as Europe protecting themselves from their economy, that is their extraction. So we need to make sure that this is fair on a global scale, because Europe, even if we suppose we solve the problem of the footprint of digital, we are zero, that will not save us. Saving 3% of emissions will not save us. If Europe realizes the potential and we cut 20% in Europe, that will not save us either. So this is a global issue. And that global issue has been, as Luis said, also recently boosted in terms of competitiveness. So the digital, and there is nobody, there is no institution, not even EIT digital, together with EIT climate, if you put all your brains together, and I know you guys, you still don't have the capacity to optimize the world of digitalization with respect to three-dimensional world, economy, society, environment. There is no systemic experience and knowledge how to do this. So we talk slices. There are jihadists on social issues. There are jihadists on environmental issues. There are people that only care about economics and GDP. But there is nobody that has the big picture. We are lacking as humanity to even have the framework for it. And digital decade, we go in infancy. That's why I say infancy. We are the first one that tried to look at the three dimensions. Look at the report. It's already scheduled. I mean, the part 1, part 2, part 3 is economy, society, environment. I think we are the first one to dare to even kind of try to optimize against these three dimensions. And it'll be difficult in the beginning because we will have a lot of resistance from jihadists of each of these dimensions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we are close to finish the workshop. Yeah, okay.
Just a very quick reaction, Luis, because I need to challenge the statement you've made, because telecom networks are a business-to-business product. It's not like a fridge where a consumer needs a label, and because otherwise he doesn't understand how energy efficient is. And I speak under the control of Alessandro, who represents network operators. It is very, I mean, network operators really look at how much electricity they need, how much energy they spend. It's a key factor in their OpEx. So they constantly, from every improvement, every new standard that is developed, they expect a much higher potential of the networks, much higher performance of the equipment, but they don't want a higher energy bill. So we're under pressure from business to business to look at.
So it's money, it's not sustainability.
It's the best is if both go hand in hand. You know, if it's an economic pressure that drives you to become more sustainable.
I'll be very brief. Look, I very much appreciate this discussion and I enjoy it. And the only reason I'm intervening is there is one thing I want to underline, and in particular, 2 words I want to say that I haven't heard yet, which surprises me a bit. But before I do, I just mentioned I was in New York recently, actually New Haven in Connecticut nearby, at a conference. And I had the opportunity to speak to Dan Yergin there, whom you may know, his book, The Prize, probably the largest, most interesting definitive history of the oil industry that was ever written. He is an expert on how the industry's evolved over the years. And my question to him was, I said, Dan, this time it's different. What's going to happen now? And his answer was, he said, I don't know, but raw materials are going to be a really big part of it. And that got me reflecting and even doing a little bit of research on my own. And I have looked into this. And what he's saying is right. Raw materials are going to be a really big part of it. The copper content of electric cars is roughly 3 times what the carbon content was before. Lithium as well, cobalt, a lot of things that we always thought were really obscure, they're really important for batteries and for renewables. Now, the reason I give this long introduction is the 2 words I wanted to mention are circular economy. This is really important. It's not just about mining. This little thing is full of copper and full of lithium. And we need to treat this systematically. We can't just have recycling of items as something that happens because it's good and it's moral and we get a nice score on a sustainability card somewhere. We have to systematically build this in and use and reuse the elements that we have. Digital agenda, great. It's all nice. It's ephemeral. It has a concrete role that exists on the ground, and we have to manage things very, very well in that area. And Elias, I'm delighted to hear that you're already thinking about that. I wanted to underline it and say it's not simply a moral issue. Circular economy is a practical issue, an important issue for Europe, for European competitiveness, for our society, for everything going forward.
Thank you very much for reminding. That was a point I had highlighted, even in bold, for me to mention due to lack of time. Let me just tell you that if I had to choose one area, if I had only one silver bullet, if I said, you with digital, you have only one bullet to shoot at something, it'll be making our economy circular. It's bigger than precision farming, you know, because we have 5 major sectors we work with Luis on: energy, transport, construction, smart cities, agriculture, and manufacturing, 6. But if I had to choose one, circular economy. And that's why, if you know the new kid on the block, it's called Digital Product Passport. That's my biggest headache. That's actually what makes me sleep deprived lately, because we have legislation and member states are pushing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's now the time for closing the morning. Before leaving Kasia to conclude, I'd like to say that I would like really to thank you all of you who have been participating actively, all of those who have been attending the session remotely. Again, we will come back to the point on comments that were made on the chat, and again, this is a start, and there is a rendezvous that is very important in Stockholm, and in the meantime, don't hesitate to put forward elements on Futurium. On my side, I just take a couple of very important elements. I mean, we have touched on very important, sometimes tough realities, and clearly the challenge is huge. You know, the way we have been deeper in the rabbit hole of digital transformation show that the complexity is very important. But I note a huge appetite to work together. And second, I think that the digital decade is offering us a very important framework for organizing the work and, you know, focusing, and also speeding the pace of the work and the discussion with member states. So with this, I think, positive note, I think we can work now with more evidence in our head, and we are ready to take on next steps. So Kasia, I mean, as a head of all these digital decade elements, I mean, please.
Thank you so much, Eric. And so my name is Kasia Sztuka, for those who don't know me yet. I've had a chance to work with many of you over the years. And indeed, we will be leading this with Eric, this team on the digital decade, really focusing all the aspects, the economic aspects, the country knowledge, but also the interaction with stakeholders in our unit, which we just started on the 1st of April. But I hope that you enjoyed the discussion today as much as I enjoyed it. Coming back to what was said, I think that we really have a lot of that talent and knowledge around the table, and it is really the crunch time. I think it was at the tipping point now, and but I also see the opportunity. I have had the chance in the past to work on many digital strategies. Ilias is still at the digital agenda. We had the digital single market, but now we have the digital decade, and the digital decade is different. You could see it today in this workshop. It wasn't just the Commission talking. Hopefully, you had a chance to really express yourself, because we want to do things differently this time. So. We had previous strategies that, you know, we never really tracked that progress. And I think that was mentioned here today, that the numbers are important. The numbers speak to politicians as well. So thanks a lot for also your input here, because when we have those numbers, we can really pass those messages and make that change. But what I remember from the previous strategies is we often had, you know, we said, yes, this would be a great idea, but we don't have the money. Now we have the RRF, where we have also the 20% for digital. This is a lot of billions of euros that we're spending at the same time. So you could say that it's a bit of a one-time opportunity in this crunch moment to combine all these things, to have our targets, we heard not only targets, but also objectives. And I have to say that I've worked also in the past, and you might remember, Louis, on the digital principles as well. So I strongly believe in that of putting people in the center of this, but I've also worked on the other parts of what the DG Connect does, and I think we need to bring these things together. And I see that as a positive thing, because today I saw a lot of opportunities, and I think we really have that opportunity to make things better. It's still possible. We're still okay, relatively close, but also relatively far away from 2030. And that history is not yet written. So we can shape it together. And I would like to encourage this conversation to continue, because for us, we see that we cannot reach the targets without the stakeholders, without the industry. It will not happen. Even if, government or the Commission can have the highest ambition, we need everyone to work together, and we need to do that more. I see that in the Commission, we always have to listen more to the industry, to the experts, but also to the stakeholders and the civil society and the people out there. So this is something that I hope that we have learned a lesson. At least it's our intention to work very closely together in this process. And we have a formal structure, as was mentioned, with the member states, but we would like to keep also, so we have an expert group and a committee with member states, but what we were mentioning with Paul over the coffee break as well, is that we would like to have this interaction with experts, to have really this high quality dialogue, to make the best out of all this talent, all this knowledge that is out there in Europe, and to try to shape this going forward. So a big thank you. Let's continue the discussion over lunch. But before we go to lunch, I wanted to thank the team for preparing this event today. So Eric, Lavinia, but also Lars, Clara, and Raquel, who helped us organize it today. And yeah, let's have a great discussion over lunch without the squeaking microphones. Hopefully that will make things easier. And for those who joined us online, thank you very much for those comments. We will study them, and I would really encourage you to share information, share your ideas, shape your data. We don't know everything. We don't have all the answers, so we need your input to make things better and to make the best use of this opportunity. So thank you very much.